The boy with a tough, unyielding face is none other than our protagonist, Sano. Sano Haruto, a low-level adventurer living the predictable life of a hunter. He is constantly treated as a mere errand boy because of his cursed skill, copy and paste. In this world of hunters, leveling up is of utmost importance. However, the downside of his ability makes leveling nearly impossible. Before long, he is kicked out of the Hunters Guild he had joined. Ultimately, his team couldn't afford to keep him around any longer due to the uselessness of his cursed skill. Now unemployed, Sano accidentally discovers a way to use his ability in combat against monsters. He begins to realize that perhaps his skill isn't as worthless as he once believed. His story begins deep inside a certain dungeon. Suddenly, a massive explosion shakes the cavern. The source of the blast? A rock golem, whose brutal attacks are putting a party of adventurers to the test. This is a low-level dungeon, the Margwil Golem Zone. In the midst of battle, Sano grips an iron shield. However, as the golem's heavy punch connects, a large piece of the shield shatters, and Sano himself is knocked off balance, his face skewed from the blow. From behind, another shield bearer shouts, "Don't let it hit the head. Deflect the attack to the side." Hearing this, a swordsman at the front shifts the golem's punch away from the group. Seizing the moment, the rest of the team rallies, shouting, "Now, attack!" The dark-haired young man tightens his grip on his short sword and charges forward, plunging his blade into the golem's chest. His teammates follow, landing blow after blow on the towering monster, leaving it riddled with wounds. Enraged, the golem's eyes suddenly glow a fiery red, as though made of molten steel. Its movements become faster, its presence more menacing, as it barrels toward the group with renewed fury. "Brace yourselves. It's gone berserk," the lead shield bearer shouts. "Everyone, into defensive positions. Mages, prepare to finish it off." "Roger," the group yells in unison. Following the command, a robed mage begins to channel mana, gathering energy for a decisive spell. At the same time, the shield bearer turned to Sano and shouted, "Hey, mana gopher, what are you standing around for? We're running out of mana here." I know. Sano yelled back. Mana Gopher, that was his nickname. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist squeezed his eyes shut to concentrate. When he opened them again, a pale blue energy began to gather in both of his hands. In one swift motion, he unleashed it straight into the back of the mage, replenishing his energy reserves. Feeling the surge of power coursing through his body, the mage smirked. "Nice. This much mana is more than enough to take down that giant golem king." On the other side, oblivious to the mage's newfound strength, the rampaging rock golem continued its relentless charge. With a confident grin, the mage pointed his staff directly at it. "Take this." A streak of golden lightning shot out from his staff, striking the golem square in the chest. The massive creature froze for a split second before crumbling into dust, defeated in an instant. The rest of the party, exhausted but relieved, collapsed onto the ground, their breaths heavy with fatigue. But before Sano could even catch his breath, a heavily armored man stomped over to him and said, "Hunter Sano, you didn't contribute much in today's purge, did you? Get up and help clear the path." "Got it," Sano replied, springing to his feet. Watching him scurry off, a gray-cloaked man muttered, "Isn't he supposed to have strong offensive potential? Why is he just playing support?" In response, a man in a yellow tunic shrugged. Obviously, his skills are limited, but his mana capacity? Practically infinite. Hearing this, a man in a green robe shot up, eyes wide in disbelief. "Infinite mana? Whoa, that's practically the strongest skill you could ever have." Hearing this, the man in yellow couldn't help but chuckle. "Strong? In what way?" "Mages can absorb mana from healers too. You know, the only time you need a huge supply of mana is when fighting boss-level monsters, like today." The mage in the party nodded in agreement, adding, "That explains why he's been a hunter for 5 years and still hasn't reached level 30. Meanwhile, the sarcastic comments landed directly in Sano's ears. They weren't wrong. Every word stung with the weight of truth. Holding in his frustration, He kicked a few rocks out of the way as he helped clear the path. Despite his low rank, even a weak hunter far outmatched ordinary people in strength. Shut your mouths already. I know you're saying it loud enough just so I can hear. Sano growled to himself, fists clenched. No matter how much they talk, I'll never give up, he thought determinedly. Time passed, and the scene shifted to a large, imposing building, the Great Sage Guild headquarters. The moment Sano returned to the guild, however, bad news awaited him. Wait, Captain, what do you mean? Why am I being transferred to the production department? I'm a hunter, he protested, slamming his hands on the desk in frustration. Across from him, the bespectacled captain remained calm and collected, tapping his fingers on the table as he explained. Sano, do you have any idea how hard it's been to find teammates willing to hunt with you? No one in the guild can work with you anymore. At level 29, you can't participate in high-level hunts, and the only skill you can reliably use is generating unlimited mana. He punctuated his words with another tap of his fingers, and the logic hit Sano like a heavy blow. His face darkened. But that means I can provide enough mana for any hunt. I'll reach level 30 soon. And when that happens, Sano began to argue. However, before Sano could continue his plea, the captain raised a hand to cut him off. Most mages and healers already have mana absorption skills. In a real combat scenario, your ability would have little to no practical value. So tell me, Sano, do you really think reaching level 30 will change anything? The captain's tone remained calm but resolute. This decision was made after carefully considering your strengths. You should fully utilize your potential by working in the mana potion production department. Focus on what you do best, and work hard. With that, the captain confidently adjusted his glasses, a smug expression crossing his face. Sano, unwilling to accept his fate, clenched his fists and asked bitterly, if I refuse, I'll be kicked out of the guild, won't I? The captain didn't hesitate. I'm sorry, but I see no further potential in you. We can't afford to keep you on. Time passed, and the scene transitioned to a quiet park bench. Sano, now unemployed, sat slouched, yawning lazily. Man, one blink, and I'm jobless, he muttered with a sigh. His thoughts wandered to his cursed skill. Everyone believed it was merely about generating mana and transferring it to allies. But there was far more to it, something he had never revealed to anyone. As the idea simmered in his mind, he absent-mindedly grabbed a rice ball sitting beside him. A notification screen suddenly materialized in front of his eyes. Do you want to copy the target? Ctrl+C. Sano blinked in surprise, then tapped the confirmation button. Instantly, a second identical rice ball materialized in his hand, a perfect replica of the first. Seeing this, Sano barely reacted, as if it was something he had witnessed countless times before. Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, this skill lets me copy and replicate a target. He sighed inwardly. When I first awakened as a hunter, I had such high hopes, but I quickly realized that this skill was trash. It only allows me to create duplicate items I can use, but the moment they leave my hand, they vanish like illusions. So, copying money? Impossible. Reselling equipment? Out of the question. He clenched his fists. To make things worse, there's a rank limit. I can only copy and use equipment that requires level 90 or higher. His mind wandered to his infamous nickname, Mana Gopher. The truth behind my unlimited mana isn't some grand ability. It's just me copying the pitiful amount of mana I have, over and over again. Unlike copied items, copied mana doesn't vanish, and I can transfer it to other hunters. He gritted his teeth. I even tried copying skills, but that requires ridiculous conditions, like finishing off a high-level monster. Yeah, good luck with that. Frustration boiled over, and he crushed the soda can in his hand, trapped in a vicious cycle with no way out. To copy equipment or skills, he needed a high rank or to defeat powerful monsters, but all he had was the copy skill, which made his contribution to battles nearly worthless. As a result, his leveling speed was slower than a snail's crawl. 5 years, and I'm still not even level 30. Level 90? I'd die of old age before getting there. He clenched his jaw, If only I could level up a few times and copy some decent gear. I could join any hunt I wanted. His thoughts burned with desperation. God, if I could just hit level 30. Sano glanced longingly at his phone screen, where an ad displayed the sleek image of a black sword. Breaking news: the Kalisha Longsword arrives in Japan. The description boasted, Kalisha Longsword, 2 special skills and enhanced defense effects. The reason why this sword, the only one of its kind among all the longswords in the world, is so special lies in its unique attribute, its inherent rank. The moment it's wielded, the wielder's level instantly skyrockets to 200. What's even more enticing is that any hunter at level 30 or higher can equip it. Seeing this information, Sano couldn't help but drool. Even though it's called a legendary sword, it's super easy to use, even for low-level hunters. If I copy this sword, I'll immediately become a level 230 hunter. He clenched his fists in determination. This sword has to be my top priority now. According to the information, the Kalisha Longsword would be on display in Japan for 1 week as part of an exhibition. With only 10 durability points remaining, it could only survive a few more hunts. That's why it had been retired as a weapon and turned into a showpiece to raise funds. This is my golden chance. Sano's heart raced as he thought it through. If I can just touch the sword once, durability won't matter. I can copy it and use it forever. If I can reach level 30 within a week, I'll be able to copy it and wield it myself. Once I rank up, everything will fall into place. His mind spiraled into daydreams of future glory. A few days later, inside a dark and damp cavern, a team of hunters battled furiously against a horde of giant spiders. They were deep within the king spider's lair, an unregistered dungeon filled with unknown dangers. Hey, mana guy, I need more mana over here. A blonde-haired wizard shouted over the chaos, flames dancing around him. Got it. Sano snapped into action, charging the wizard with a surge of energy. The mage's entire body lit up with fiery power. Perfect. Time to roast these bugs to a crisp. He swung his staff, unleashing a massive pillar of fire. The inferno consumed the spiders, filling the air with the scent of burning flesh. The flame's sheer intensity forced the others to shield their faces from the scorching heat. The power gap is insane. That guy's firepower is on a whole new level. Sano muttered under his breath as he checked his status screen again. Maybe, just maybe I'll level up this time. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Checking your status again? No matter how often you look, it won't magically change. Sano stiffened, embarrassed by the jab. Hey, no, I'm just preparing for the boss fight. The dark-haired hunter beside him smirked knowingly. Sure. By the way, Sano-senpai, don't forget to pay your viewing fee. Huh? Viewing fee? Sano blinked, confused. Yeah, buy me a drink when we're done, and we're even. The younger hunter, Ikegana Aoi, grinned as he adjusted his weapon. A fellow guild member and attack-specialized hunter, Aoi had clearly joined this unregistered dungeon raid for the payout. Unlike officially reported dungeons, this one wasn't listed with the hunter organization, making it far more dangerous but also lucrative. Sano sighed. Fine. Once I level up, drinks are on me. After a brief rest, someone finally spoke up. Hey, now that we've cleared the path, let's keep moving. The boss is just up ahead, so let's finish this quickly. With that, time seemed to fly by as the group pressed forward, drawing closer to the boss's lair. When they reached it, they came face to face with a colossal spider. The leader of the group raised a hand to signal a halt. Everyone, stop, he whispered. We're here. This is the lair of Alexa, the giant spider king, level 80. Turning to Sano, the sheer size and overwhelming aura radiating from the sleeping spider made his scalp tingle. Even with the creature dormant, he could feel a paralyzing fear creeping through his veins. Holy crap, this thing is terrifying. If I so much as touch one of its legs, I'm dead on the spot. Beads of sweat rolled down his face as dread built in his chest. Can we even defeat something like this? Noticing his anxiety, Ikegana chuckled and teased. Senior, what are you so scared of? You don't even have to fight. He glanced at the spider and added, "Relax. It's not that hard to deal with. Once you get stuck in its webbing, though, you're locked in place, unable to move. Oh, and watch out for those eggs over there. If we mess up its territory, it'll get seriously pissed off." A berserk spider king is no joke. It's way worse than most other monsters. Before he could elaborate further, the team's mage groaned impatiently. "Hey, Ikegana, why are you giving a whole lecture to a bystander? What are you, the tour guide? Seriously? My bad." Ikegana chuckled sheepishly. "We don't have time for this," the mage snapped. "Besides, that spectator fee isn't even worth the crumbs in my pocket." Sano's face twitched in annoyance. The mage, oblivious to his surroundings, kicked a loose rock that rolled across the floor and into a strand of spider silk. In an instant, the delicate web vibrated. Sensing the disturbance, the Spider King's many eyes flew open. A deafening roar filled the cavern as the massive creature reared up, its gigantic legs poised to strike. "Damn it!" shouted a man clad in green armor, cursing the mage's entire family lineage. "You idiot! The Spider King woke up because of you." He gritted his teeth, raised his shield high, and braced himself just as one of the monstrous legs came crashing down toward them. With a swift, powerful swing, he brought down the sword in his other hand, severing part of the spider's massive leg. A thick stream of purple blood gushed out as he bellowed, "Get that disgusting leg off me!" His voice echoed through the cavern, dripping with fury. Spinning around, he barked orders to the others. "Watch out for the webs and those spiderlings when you're attacking." Without hesitation, the entire group sprang into action, moving with practiced precision. They spread out, surrounding the massive creature and launching an all-out assault from every direction. Due to its sheer size, the hunters could climb onto its body and attack freely, each strike landing with deadly force. The giant spider writhed and thrashed, howling in rage, but its overwhelming strength seemed useless against their coordinated onslaught. At the back of the formation, Sano, playing the role of a background character, grinned ear to ear. He could barely contain his glee. Totally worth it. Spending a bit of cash to tag along with these elite hunters was paying off big time. Watching them crush the beast as easily as scooping up soup, he felt a rush of excitement. Man, these guys are insanely powerful. If everything goes smoothly, I should hit level 35 once we finish off this monster. His mind wandered as visions of future triumph filled his thoughts. In his imagination, the legendary sword Kalisha seemed to shimmer, calling to him with an almost tangible allure. Victory was so close he could practically feel it. Back in the heat of battle, sensing that if it didn't act soon, it would be slowly whittled down by the relentless hunters. The giant Spider King made a swift move. It spun its body around, aiming its massive rear directly at the group. Seeing this motion, the guy in blue immediately understood what was coming next. His voice rang out in a sharp warning. "It's about to shoot webs. Fall back behind the pillars." While the smarter hunters quickly obeyed, the foolhardy mage decided to do the opposite. Instead of retreating, he stood his ground, hands raised high as he summoned fiery magic. A massive fireball began to take shape above his head, glowing with intense heat. "Everyone get clear. I'm blowing this spider to pieces with my ultimate skill." The moment the words left his mouth, the spider's abdomen swelled. It unleashed a torrent of silk into the air. The threads spiraled and intertwined, forming a thick web that raced forward to intercept the fireball. To everyone's shock, the sticky web didn't ignite on contact. Instead, it held firm, absorbing the full impact of the fiery blast without a hint of burning. The sheer resilience of the silk made the mage's eyes widen in disbelief. "What the? A spider stopped my fireball?" His pride as a mage took a critical hit. Gritting his teeth, he growled, "Like hell I'll let this slide. I'll keep firing until I see you burn." Fueled by indignation, he began channeling another wave of magic, preparing to unleash an even larger inferno. But just then, the protagonist seemed to piece something together and urgently shouted, "Wait, stop." Before he could finish, the stubborn mage had already launched a barrage of fireballs toward the spider. "Take this, you overgrown bug," he yelled triumphantly. His reckless attack made the guy in blue grit his teeth in frustration, hands clenching as he fought the urge to smack some sense into him. "You idiot! What if you break the eggs?" he roared, his voice brimming with fury. The mage flinched, realizing too late that his enthusiasm might have gone way too far. The color drained from his face as he glanced nervously at the giant nest full of delicate eggs behind the Spider King. However, it was already too late to salvage the situation. "Too late," Sano muttered, his face as pale as someone about to meet their end. Under the relentless fire from the mage, the eggs began to crack, and upon seeing this, the guy in blue quickly abandoned the idea of continuing the fight. He turned to the group and shouted, "This is bad. Everyone retreat. It's about to go berserk." Before he could finish his warning, a silk bullet shot out from the front and struck him, pinning him to the wall. With no time to check on him, Ikehagana quickly began running, but not without calling out to Sano. "Senior Sano, get behind the pillars. Quick. If it goes berserk, it's going to shoot webs everywhere." Just as Ikehagana predicted, the Spider King shrieked in fury, its body tensing as it fired silk bullets in all directions. Ikehagana hadn't found shelter in time before he was struck and pinned to the wall. And it wasn't just him, the idiot mage was also caught. "How is my fire magic not even able to deal with this webbing? Damn it!" he shouted, his voice laced with frustration. But his outburst caught the attention of the Spider King, which recognized him as the one responsible for the destruction of its eggs. Back to the mage, now fully aware that the Spider King had locked its gaze on him. He was so terrified that he nearly wet himself. "Stop, please. I beg you. Don't come near me," he screamed desperately. But before he could react any further, a massive leg of the Spider King slammed into him, splattering him with blood. Turning back to Sano, who was now trapped just like the others in his group, he realized there was no way he could escape. His body was completely ensnared by the webs, unable to even speak. As the spider's massive mouth drew closer, Sano cursed internally. "Damn it, I always stayed in low-level dungeons to be safe. Never thought I'd die like this just because I wanted to level up once. Damn it all." After his tirade, the Spider King raised one of its legs high, preparing to end his life and send him to the afterlife. Or at least, that's what anyone looking at the scene would think. Would you like to paste what you've copied? Pressing Ctrl+V. My copy-paste skills aren't really a limitation either. Even if the item I copy and duplicate disappears, I myself will never vanish. So before entering the dungeon, I copied myself entirely, leaving no part unscathed. Just like in a game, once I die, my previous form will be pasted back, and my body will disappear. Back to the battle. Suddenly, Sano's body turned grayish-black and slowly shattered into pieces. Watching his body disintegrate like that, Sano grit his teeth and thought, "Damn it, no matter how many times I see it, I can never get used to it." But at this moment, if he didn't use this trick, there was no other choice. Just as this thought crossed his mind, the Spider King suddenly sensed his presence. It swiftly slammed its foot down, crushing Sano's body, turning it into a flattened mess like a bug. "That damn monster!" he cursed and quickly reassembled his body. After reappearing, the protagonist quickly hid behind a rock, holding his breath as best as he could. "I'm doomed. At this rate, I'll have to copy and paste myself endlessly. I need to find a way out of here," he thought to himself, when suddenly he heard a faint voice beside him. "Help, help me." Hearing the familiar voice, Sano was a little startled. "Ikehagana, is he still alive?" he muttered, but then turned away helplessly. "I'm sorry, but I don't even know what to do myself." Despite Sano's internal thoughts, Ikehagana continued to groan, calling out for help. His cries drew the attention of the giant spider, which charged at him like a tank. Seeing this, even though logic told Sano not to be foolish and rush out, he couldn't just stand there and watch his junior get slaughtered. "This is crazy. If I leave him now, I'll lose my status as a senior," he thought. With that, Sano gripped his sword tightly and rushed forward, slashing at the spider's leg. However, upon impact, all he heard was a metallic sound, like metal striking metal. Then, The Spider King slightly kicked its leg, sending Sano flying to the side. However, at least for now, it had momentarily distracted the spider from focusing on Ikigana. Nice. I've diverted its attention, Sano thought happily. Just then, a notification appeared saying, "You have leveled up," which confused Sano even more. What the heck? How did I level up? He wondered. Could it be that my attack earlier actually did something to it? As Sano was lost in thought, the spider lunged at him, stabbing its leg through his chest, tearing a part of his body apart. Not again. Sano cursed as he felt the sting of death. I leveled up, and now all I need to do is copy the Kalisha longsword. Forget it. I don't even care anymore. If I can't get out of here, I'll just die 1,000 times to take you down, he grumbled. Even if I only inflict the smallest of wounds, my copy-paste ability is enough. Killing you is just a matter of time. With that, Sano, frustrated, grabbed his sword and charged at the Spider King to go all out. Let's see which of us falls first, he muttered under his breath. Time quickly passed, and 3 days later, after Sano had thrown himself into the battle. At that moment, Sano was panting heavily. Since then, I've fought day and night, and I've died about 50 times. All the weapons I brought, including the ones from my teammates, have been destroyed. But thanks to this fight, I've grown much stronger, he thought. The giant spider was gradually weakening as the battle wore on. Luckily, it didn't have any healing abilities. As Sano thought this, he swung his sword and chopped off part of the spider's leg, causing the Spider King to screech in pain and quickly retreat. Then, the monstrous spider turned its back towards Sano and immediately shot countless threads in his direction. Seeing this, Sano grit his teeth and ran. Over the past 3 days, he had been tortured by this move countless times. Ugh, I've died from this attack 4 times already, he sighed inwardly. At the same time, from above, a sharp spider leg shot straight towards Sano, forcing him to slam on the brakes. Quickly, he used the leg as leverage to climb upwards, aiming for the spider's head. Go back to the earth, he muttered as he put all his strength into his hands and slashed directly at the spider's head. However, the head didn't break, and instead, Sano's sword snapped in two. Seeing his last weapon break, his eyes widened in shock. Damn it, this cheap sword. I shouldn't have copied it, he yelled before his body crashed to the ground. At that moment, taking advantage of the opening, the Spider King roared and rushed its face towards Sano. Damn it. Sano gritted his teeth, but like a drop of water causing an overflow. Right after his strike, a crack appeared where he had slashed, spreading across the body of the giant monster. In the end, the massive spider exploded into countless pieces, sparing Sano the need to experience another resurrection. Sano, lying on the ground, panting heavily, looked at the spider's remains scattered everywhere. He let out a relieved laugh. Haha, I did it finally. Damn that spider. Losing to a low-level hunter like me. You must feel pretty stupid. Huh, I died like 56 times. You know? Just then, numerous notifications appeared in front of him. You have leveled up. You have leveled up, and you have received a reward for defeating the giant Spider King. Ignoring the rewards for the moment, Sano took a short rest to recover. Then, with Ikigana on his back, he began heading toward the exit. Ikigana, hang in there. I owe you a drink, remember? Now, I'll treat you to some top-shelf whiskey, he said. But before he could say another word, a sharp whistling sound filled the air. Something struck Sano's waist, causing him to cry out in pain. At the same time, Ikigana was tossed off his back and sent flying behind him. Sano, not having time to check on Ikigana, quickly shifted his focus to the immediate danger in front of him. Before his eyes stood a swarm of spiderlings, each the size of a truck. These were the offspring of the giant Spider King he had just defeated, all level 30. The countless red eyes glimmering in the darkness made Sano's lips curl into a wry smile. Are you kidding me? He thought. The desert was already unbearable, but he could handle it. Ikigana, on the other hand, wouldn't survive if he took a hit. As the spiderlings charged towards him, Sano instinctively threw himself forward, using his own body to shield Ikigana. Just when Sano braced himself for yet another revival, a flash of light cut through the air. A sword strike cleaved the nearest spiderling in half. The remaining creatures paused and turned towards the source of the attack, before they all began charging toward it. A woman, her posture calm and controlled, raised her spear and muttered a word under her breath. Nguk Hoa. A massive column of blue fire erupted from the tip of her spear, obliterating the remaining spiderlings in an instant. Watching the skill unfold, Sano's mind raced. Nguk Hoa, a high-level fire magic skill, one of the rarest in the system. Only a handful of magic-based hunters can wield it. He thought back to a name. In Japan, there's only one person who can use this skill, the Spear Witch, a mage knight hybrid with the sacred spear. She ranks 5th in Japan's hunter leaderboard. After clearing the spiderlings, the woman turned to Sano and asked, "Is it just the two of you left?" "Yes, we were lucky," Sano replied lightly, but his gaze was on the woman now. Noticing the keen observations she made, she surveyed the scene, quickly realizing what had happened. The spider eggs had hatched, and the giant Spider King had entered a berserk state. Most of her team had likely perished. But how is it possible for you to survive such a monster, and even have time to save others? She mused, studying Sano closely. You look like a low-level hunter. So what exactly happened here? Her words made Sano tense, but he couldn't answer her directly. She had a sharp eye for detail, and he knew that whatever story he gave would have to be a good one. Time quickly passed, and the scene shifted to the Hunters Association in Japan. After being rescued and brought outside, what awaited Sano was the interrogation room of the association. However, Sano wasn't the least bit dissatisfied. In fact, he was somewhat relieved. "Thank you so much, Hunter Nanace," Sano said. "If it weren't for you, we would have never made it out of there alive. And I also want to thank the head of the department for facilitating the access to the dungeon and reporting this." In response, Nanace spoke coldly. "I was just doing my job as a member of the association, just getting the task done. That's all." She then took out a pouch and placed it on the table. "The items dropped by the giant Spider King have been reported. You're free to go now. I want to go home too." As she spoke, she began quickly wrapping up the paperwork. Sano was surprised by how simple everything seemed. "Wait, a whole team of high-level hunters got wiped out, and I had to pay to participate in a dungeon cleansing that wasn't even properly verified. And that's it? Really?" Upon hearing this, Nanace raised an eyebrow and complained. "What else did you expect? There are countless accidents in dungeons every day. Didn't you know that? You signed the agreement that you accept all risks when you joined, right? And as for the illegal dungeon teams, the association overlooks lower-level hunters using money to join high-level hunts. Especially when it's for leveling up, hunters naturally want to increase their strength. And even though this might bring some negative consequences, it still helps in the development of the hunting teams." She paused for a moment, then asked, "Is there anything else?" At this point, Sano realized there was no point in making more trouble for himself, so he simply replied, "No." He stood up, ready to leave. Before he left, Nanace added, "Oh, the payment for the items dropped by the monsters has already been calculated. It will be transferred to you in a few days." Sano responded, "I don't need it. Please give that money to my juniors." With that, he quickly turned and left. Seeing this, Nanace shrugged slightly and said, "What's this? You're being so cold about it. This is a big sum of money, you know." With those words, Nanace's face grew slightly contemplative. No matter how lucky someone might be, for a low-level hunter to survive in such a high-level dungeon, and alone at that, Hunter Sano was definitely hiding something. Meanwhile, as Sano walked away, he couldn't help but grin from ear to ear. Of course, he wasn't rich enough to just ignore that kind of money. But the only reason he made this decision was that he had already gotten enough out of it. He thought to himself, "It's about time my juniors get a little taste of the rewards too. Success. Complete success." He muttered to himself as he opened his storage. "Let's open the warehouse." Inside his inventory was an item called Giant Spider King's Webbing, and the quantity of it was countless. Looking at these items, Sano couldn't help but let out a few chuckles. Haha, the Giant Spider King really is the ultimate treasure chest. To explain this, let's rewind a few hours to when the Giant Spider King was defeated. At that time, Sano had received its webs. The detailed description of the item read, Giant Spider King's Webbing has the same properties as the Giant Spider King's silk. When used, it reveals a strong adhesive ability for a period of time. Required level, 40. Looking at the simple description, the protagonist couldn't help but feel disappointed. After dying and coming back to life 56 times just to get this worthless thing, he thought, what is this? Isn't it just super glue? I died and came back just to get this? Ugh, how boring. He wondered. I wonder if this would work as a repellent for bugs while camping outside? Well, let's just duplicate it first, he muttered. With that, Sano proceeded to copy the item. Then, feeling curious, he tapped the webbing a few times and thought, so how do I use this thing? Suddenly, after just a few taps, the webbing in his hand disappeared, startling him. What the hell? Where did it go? He exclaimed in shock. To answer his question, a notification popped up from the system. The Giant Spider King's Webbing has been merged into your existing skill. The skill Control plus V has been upgraded. Sano stared at the screen in disbelief, his eyes glued to the notification to see if he was seeing things. Wait, my copy-paste skill just evolved, he thought, still processing the sudden change. As he thought, another notification popped up. Control plus C allows the player to copy the target. The upgraded skill is now under control. Control plus V allows the user to paste what has been copied. Level 1. New skills are now available. Sano blinked in surprise at the 3 new skill options. Option 1. You can copy the target and paste it within a desired time period. Option 2. You can paste the target anywhere within a specified time frame. Option 3. You will not be affected by the Giant Spider King's Webbing. Glancing over the options, Sano couldn't help but smile to himself. It seemed like his luck had finally turned around. What the heck? I thought these were going to be some useless choices. But this is amazing, he exclaimed. I have to try this right now. He immediately selected the first option. With a quick motion, a chunk of webbing appeared right in front of him. Even though the webbing wasn't in his hands, it didn't disappear. No matter how much he moved his hands, the webbing stayed intact. Just this alone was a huge step forward. A whole minute passed, and the webbing was still there, unchanged. The more he thought about it, the more excited Sano became. His eyes sparkled like stars. With just this single upgrade to his skill, he already had a billion ways to get rich in his head. Haha, I'm going to make as many copies as possible. 30 minutes, 100 years, 1,000 years, just like that, he thought. Soon, countless copies of the webbing with varying time limits appeared in his inventory. Back in the present moment, remembering all of this, Sano couldn't contain his excitement and shouted loudly, "It's finally happening! Starting today, I'm going to get rich. I'll live the life of a hunter on top of the social ladder." With that thought, the grin on his face grew wider, stretching all the way from ear to ear. Now all I need is to copy and mass-produce the long Kalisha sword. He was grinning like a Cheshire cat, envisioning the fortune that awaited him. 2 hours earlier, at the Rainbow Bridge in Tokyo, a large semi-truck was escorted by several black sedans both in front and behind it. Lead vehicle, please maintain speed and distance. Hold your current velocity, a voice instructed over the radio. Inside one of the vehicles, a blonde hunter turned to the person seated next to him. "Hey, Aries, how many times have you been to Japan now?" he asked casually. The man was more grand. Level 112, a member of the International Hunters Association. Sitting beside him was Aries Hugh, level 131, a mage and fellow member of the same association. "Twice," she replied curtly. Hearing this, Moore seemed to recall something. "Didn't you say your mother was from Japan? You must have moved away when you were young." "Huh." Aries, unfazed, responded coolly. What does her birthplace have to do with me? I don't feel anything about it. More. Never one to drop a topic easily. Added. Japan is also the last country hosting the Long Kalisha Sword Exhibition. So, did you join the trip to take a vacation? Unbothered by his tone, Ares admitted without hesitation. Yes, I wanted to look for a few things in one of Japan's dungeons. Moore smirked, leaning back in his seat. Oh, wouldn't it be great if you actually found something? His sarcastic comment didn't sit well with Ares, who was starting to get irritated. Mind your own business. If someone beats you up one day, don't wonder why, she snapped. Before Moore could respond, a voice came through the comm system. The convoy is passing through the Rainbow Bridge dungeon. Communication will be cut off for a few minutes due to electromagnetic interference from the dungeon. Curious, Moore leaned out the window to take a look. Oh wow, a dungeon right over the sea? That's so romantic. Ares glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. What nonsense are you spouting? If that thing collapses, it'll be a huge disaster. Man, you're such a killjoy. Ares. Moore complained with a dramatic sigh. Say one more romantic line, and I'll make sure to knock some sense into you. Ares shot back. Why do you always have to hand me an L, no matter what I say or do? Moore whined. Meanwhile, at the Rainbow Bridge Dungeon Access Management Office, a young man was yawning repeatedly out of sheer boredom. This was Shinoda Satoru, an attack-type hunter, level 21, and a member of the Great Sage Guild. Ugh, managing dungeon entrances is so dull, he mumbled as he stifled yet another yawn. Standing beside Shinoda was a young man clad in heavy armor, who grinned and teasingly said, You lucky monkey, you only got in here because of connections. About 3 weeks ago, this place was still pretty hectic. As he spoke, he glanced ahead, catching Shinoda's curiosity. Before Shinoda could ask what he was looking at, a small slime suddenly bounced out of nowhere, landing right at his feet. Huh? What's this little guy doing here? Shinoda muttered as he stared at the slime. It was far cuter than the usual monsters encountered inside dungeons. However, he quickly turned to his senior, asking, Hey, is it okay for these things to be wandering around outside the dungeon like this? His senior's face darkened, an unusual reaction to such a weak and harmless creature. Of course it's not okay. You clueless rich kid, he muttered while taking a few steps back. But as he moved, his back suddenly collided with something massive. The startled senior turned around, and the sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Towering behind him was a giant ogre, its enormous body radiating a menacing aura. The beast didn't waste a moment. Raising its massive spiked club, it swung it down with terrifying force. The senior gritted his teeth, raising his shield just in time to block the incoming blow. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, and a spray of blood erupted, though it was unclear whose it was. Returning to the present, our protagonist, Sano Haruto, is taking a moment to review his attribute panel after leveling up. Health, 102. Energy, 98. A class level, 4. A skill level, 1. Class skills, none. A acquired skills, Control plus C, Control plus V. Looking at his current stats, Sano grins with satisfaction. I knew it. After taking down that spider, my skill points increased. Sweet. Just a bit more, and I'll hit level 50. Reaching level 50 is a major milestone for hunters, as it makes joining dungeon clearing parties much easier. Except for beginner dungeons, mid-tier monsters usually have levels above 50. In mid-tier dungeons, hunters can earn more experience points and better rewards. Over time, rare items might even appear. That's why hunters who pass level 50 can level up much faster. Closing his system panel, Sano begins planning his next move. Alright, first things first. I should copy the giant Spider King's adhesive and sell it at an auction or something, he says with a mischievous smile. Just then, a group of hunters rushes past him in the hallway, their footsteps loud and hurried. Please clear the way, one of them shouts. Damn it, why is the dungeon collapsing all of a sudden? Another complains. Hearing this, Sano freezes in surprise. A dungeon collapse? Monsters breaking out of the dungeon? he mutters, trying to make sense of the situation. Meanwhile, back with the group of hunters, one of them, a guy wearing a cap, asks in a panicked tone, "What do we do now? Head straight to the big guilds?" His dark-haired companion quickly explains. The transport vehicle carrying the legendary sword got caught up in the chaos. This was an official request for collaboration from the International Hunter Association. Hearing this, Sano's face turns pale. The item he desperately needed to copy was in danger of being destroyed. Wait a minute. The celestial dragon sword got caught in a dungeon break? Are you kidding me? He screams internally. All the joy from leveling up vanishes instantly. Elsewhere, on the rooftop of the Hunter Association headquarters, combat aircraft are being prepped to transport hunters to the Rainbow Dungeon. Gear up and request support from the International Hunter Association. Our top priority is protecting the transport vehicle carrying the celestial dragon sword, someone orders. Protecting the transport vehicle? Whose directive is this? Another voice asks. I am the one issuing this order. A woman's voice responds firmly. As team leader, I'm giving the directive. The Hunter Association's primary goal is to defeat monsters and save civilians. This is an emergency, so we'll sort out the details later, she declares as she strides toward the aircraft. Yes, Team Leader Nanace, someone replies hastily. Suddenly, a commotion erupted behind her, drawing Nanace's attention. She turned around, only to be greeted by the sight of Sano causing a scene. Me too. Let me on board, he yelled desperately. But, of course, someone as out of place as him was quickly restrained by the others. You can't go. Get back down here, they barked, holding him back. Seeing the chaotic scene, Nanace raised her voice, commanding with authority. Hey, you, we're in a hurry here. Hurry up and get on the aircraft. Why yes, stammered a man in a suit, clearly flustered. Hearing Nanace's voice, Sano, who was struggling in the midst of the chaos, lit up as if he'd struck gold. Hunter Nanace, please let me join you. I saw everyone working on the plan just now, he shouted at the top of his lungs. I already told you. You can't come, the group restraining him snapped, gritting their teeth as they tried to drag him away. Hunter Sano? Nanace muttered under her breath, recognizing his name. Meanwhile, Sano doubled down on his persuasion tactics. I can help too. If I can't fight the monsters, at least let me assist with evacuating civilians. This is a situation where everyone needs to pitch in, right? He pleaded earnestly. Hearing this, Nanace hesitated for a moment, clearly conflicted. Then, after a brief pause, she made up her mind. All right, you're coming with us, she decided. Once aboard the aircraft, Nanace glanced at Sano, her expression one of subtle admiration. Back in the giant spider, Denver, you prioritized saving your juniors above all else. Hunter Sano, you have a surprisingly compassionate heart, even if it doesn't seem that way at first glance, she said. Sano, catching her remark, could only force out a wry smile. At the same time, he found himself somewhat impressed by her intuition. She's mistaken. My actions were 100% driven by selfish motives, he thought to himself. Leaving their conversation aside, another man in the group raised a question, his tone filled with curiosity. Doesn't this seem a little odd? It hasn't even been 3 weeks since the Rainbow Dungeon was stabilized. Right. There's nothing strange about it. Nanace replied firmly. In this world, anything can happen. A building that collapses after being reconstructed is no guarantee it won't fall again. That's exactly why we're being sent, to prevent things like this from spiraling out of control, to make sure the catastrophe from 15 years ago doesn't happen again, she added with a grave tone. Her words left the entire group in a heavy, contemplative silence. Even Sano couldn't help but clench his fists tightly after hearing those words. The calamity from 15 years ago, a worldwide disaster that unfolded simultaneously across the globe. A dungeon breakout of such a catastrophic scale that it could be compared to a natural disaster. When the monsters in a dungeon aren't hunted regularly, the dungeon becomes oversaturated and eventually collapses. At that point, the monsters escape, pouring out into the world to wreak havoc. attacking innocent people and turning everything into a living hell. These are known as dungeon breakouts. I lost my parents during that calamity, Sano thought to himself, his expression hardening. I've never told anyone about this because even I find it hard to believe. But I saw something back then, something supernatural, a being from another dimension. He recalled its eerie presence vividly. It appeared and bestowed, no, cursed me with this ability. That creature called the curse a gift and said only one thing, 20 years. I don't even know if it was referring to the duration of my skill or my lifespan. Even now, Sano could almost feel the grains of sand slipping through the cursed hourglass in his mind, steadily counting down. That creature only showed up because of the calamity, which means, if it appears again, it'll be during another disaster. History will repeat itself, and I only have 5 years left. A sense of urgency welled up within him as he resolved his path forward. Now that I've figured out how to level up my skills, I'll become the strongest hunter. I'll find a way to stop the next calamity and lift this curse from my life. But to do that, there was something he needed first. Step 1. Copy the Kalisha Dragonblade, he thought, determination blazing in his heart. The urgency of the situation surged within him, fueling his resolve. At this moment, on the Rainbow Bridge, the monsters that had escaped from the dungeon were wreaking havoc across the bridge, causing the civilians to panic and flee in all directions. Screams echoed everywhere. While the number of hunters available to handle the situation was completely insufficient, we don't have enough manpower, Shinoda thought to himself, his mind racing. At this rate, there's no way we can protect everyone. As he surveyed the area, a goblin suddenly charged at him from behind. Attempting to bite him, Shinoda gritted his teeth, swung his sword, and cleaved the green creature in half. But the assault didn't stop there. As Shinoda was finishing off the goblin, another one pounced from above, aiming to attack. Thankfully, it never got the chance. A sword flew from a distance, piercing the goblin's belly and sending it flying to the side. The one who had intervened was his senior, who had been with him earlier. "Hey, young master, stop looking around," the senior called out, reminding Shinoda. "Thank you so much." Shinoda hurriedly expressed his gratitude. Hearing this, the senior pulled his sword out of the goblin's body, annoyed. "Next time you let your guard down, I won't forgive you." Yes, Shinoda mumbled, while mentally reflecting on the situation. "He's pretty rough with that sword and even calls me young master. But he just saved me from those orcs and that last goblin too. That's 2 times now. I definitely need to repay him." Shinoda glanced at his senior, who was still grumbling about the situation. "This is insane. It's all blood. Disgusting." Ignoring his senior's complaints, Shinoda thought about the reinforcements. "By the way, have we heard anything from the backup forces?" The senior shook his head. "All communication and data exchange are being blocked by the electromagnetic waves from the dungeon. But I'm sure they've noticed something's wrong and are on their way here. We should cross the bridge. That way we might meet up with the reinforcements sooner." "Go over there?" Shinoda asked anxiously. "Better to go than stay here and offer ourselves up to those monsters." "Let's go," his senior shouted loudly. Without another word, the two of them began to move quickly. Meanwhile, in another corner, the truck transporting the legendary sword was under attack by a massive, spiked bear, King Bear, a level 190 beast. As the truck shook with each of the bear's blows, Moore voiced his concern. "Ares, do you think this truck can hold up?" "I understand your worries, Moore, but don't worry. My defensive magic is top tier. Even a level 400 monster wouldn't be able to scratch it," Ares replied confidently. And indeed, as she said, the magic she cast to protect the truck held strong after each strike. Just when they thought the legendary sword was safe, the bridge suddenly began to shake violently as a massive creature appeared. The sight of it made everyone on the bridge freeze in terror. Even Ares lost her confidence in her defensive magic. Even the highest level defensive magic is useless against it. Meanwhile, aboard the aircraft heading toward the Rainbow Dungeon, one of the team members spotted the monster and shouted, "Captain, over there!" Hearing this, Nanace turned to look. As she saw the creature, sweat started to bead on her face. The strongest boss monster of the Rainbow Dungeon, Kaishia, has appeared. At that moment, a giant dragon's head rose from the water. "Everyone, get ready," she shouted. As she did, the dragon's head opened its mouth and shot a beam of light directly toward the bridge, obliterating it in an instant. Looking at the now destroyed bridge, Sano's face went pale as he mourned. The dungeon boss just destroyed the bridge. "Is my sword still safe?" he thought anxiously. The dungeon boss noticed the group and, once again, it gathered energy and exhaled fire, aiming directly at the aircraft. The plane couldn't withstand the attack for long before it was obliterated. However, just before it exploded completely, Nanace's team of hunters managed to leap out of the plane in time. Upon landing, Nanace quickly issued orders to everyone. "The dungeon boss has appeared. Change of battle strategy. From now on, the entire guild will focus on taking down Kaishia first." "Understood," the group responded in unison. After assigning teams, Nanace suddenly remembered the protagonist. "By the way, where did Sano go?" "Oh, I'm sure he's fine. I don't think something like this could kill him," she said, dismissing her concerns for him and turning her focus back to the task at hand. She then unleashed a powerful fire technique, shooting a blue flame directly toward the dragon's head. Meanwhile, not far from her, Sano had just landed and witnessed her move, feeling a shiver run down his spine. "Fire Inferno," he murmured to himself. "This is the second time I've seen it, but it's still just as impressive as the first. I'm definitely going to copy this skill, but right now, my priority is still to copy and replicate the Kalisha long sword." With that thought in mind, Sano began moving quickly, taking advantage of the chaos to head toward the legendary sword. At the same time, in another part of the bridge, a group of masked individuals moved swiftly. "Captain, Kaishia's appearance was unexpected. If we make one wrong move, our lives are in danger," one of them spoke up. In response, the captain didn't seem afraid at all. Instead, he seemed pleased. "Actually, this situation works to our advantage. Nanace and the new guild members will surely be focused on dealing with Kaishia. After all, the fastest way to stabilize the dungeon monsters is to take down the boss. We'll take this opportunity to steal the legendary long sword. Make sure to stay hidden and avoid running into the monsters." "Got it," the group responded in unison and quickly moved forward. It seemed that the group of masked individuals had caused the dungeon collapse in order to steal the legendary sword. Meanwhile, Sano remained unaware of the group targeting him as he continued searching. Observing the monster carcasses left behind by other hunters, he thought to himself, "There are a lot of monster corpses here. Must be the work of another hunter group." The problem with these kinds of monsters is that they tend to travel in packs. "I have a bad feeling about this." Just then, he was drawn to a scream ahead. "Don't stop. Keep running." "I don't want to." The voice belonged to Shinoda, who was hacking at a wolf in front of him, while his senior, the veteran hunter, had sustained a severe wound to his side. "This isn't what I wanted to say, but when I told you to run, you should have listened," the veteran complained. Clearly, he didn't want to drag his junior into any more danger. However, Shinoda wasn't about to stand idly by and let his senior meet his end. "I'm not leaving you behind." Meanwhile, Sano quickly assessed the situation. Hunters from the dungeon management office? One of them is injured? He dismissed his concern for them, thinking, "I'm sure they can handle it on their own. I don't have time to get involved right now." Then, Sano turned his attention back to the veteran, who was visibly frustrated with Shinoda's stubbornness. "You stupid, spoiled kid. Don't you get it? Why do you think low-level monsters are appearing in a high-level dungeon like this? When they gather in packs, their strength can rival high-level monsters. The more of them there are, the more likely it is that the monsters are gathering in this area." As if to prove his point, not long after, a pack of wolves started gathering ahead, their eyes focused on the two hunters. These were low-level monster wolves, each of them at level 15. But the real danger came from their tendency to attack in packs of 20 to 30. Seeing this, Shinoda couldn't help but tremble slightly. However, He gripped his sword tightly and prepared for battle, determined to protect his senior, who had been injured while covering for him. "I'll protect you now," Shinoda shouted, stepping forward to face the wolves. Sano, who had been moving ahead, paused and remembered his own attempt to protect his junior, Ikegana, earlier. "Damn it," he muttered, frustrated with the situation. Meanwhile, the wolf pack began to close in on Shinoda and his senior. One of the wolves, unable to hold back its bloodlust, howled and leaped toward Shinoda. With its weak strength, it was immediately cut down by Shinoda's sword, but its sacrifice wasn't without effect. As the wolf fell, another, faster wolf took its chance and attacked Shinoda from behind. Quick to react, Shinoda spun around, raising his sword to block the incoming attack. With precision, he thrust his sword into the wolf's throat, killing it instantly. However, as he withdrew his sword, another black wolf lunged at him from behind. This time, Shinoda was too slow to react, and things looked dire for him. Just then, from out of nowhere, Sano flew into the scene, crashing into the black wolf and sending it flying to the side. After dealing with the immediate threat, Sano quickly turned to Shinoda. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Shinoda replied, but his gaze remained fixed on the growing pack of wolves ahead. "But there are so many of them. What do we do now?" Not wanting to endanger Shinoda any further, the young hunter tried to push Sano away. "I really appreciate your help, but you should leave. Even high-level hunters can't handle this many monsters." Sano grinned mysteriously. "I know," he said with a smile that made Shinoda uneasy, before quickly opening his inventory. "I was planning on saving these items for auction, but I'm curious. What would happen if I combined the giant Spider King's web with my skills to fight off a whole pack of monsters?" His excitement was palpable as he prepared to experiment with his newfound power. The wolf pack, seeing Sano intervene and send one of their own flying, quickly adjusted their strategy and shifted their focus to him. This time, however, they weren't foolish enough to attack one by one. Instead, a dozen wolves leaped toward him at the same time, all hoping to take down the intruder together. Shinoda, witnessing this, was initially horrified, expecting to see Sano torn apart. But what happened next was nothing like what he imagined. Rather than being overwhelmed, Sano activated his second skill option, Spider's Web, and created countless strands of webbing in front of him, ensnaring the wolves like flies caught in a net. Within seconds, a massive web pillar appeared in front of Shinoda, holding the bodies of the wolves inside. The carnage was swift, and the nutrient energy provided by the fallen beasts was more than enough to level Sano up twice. "Level up? Level up?" The notification popped up on his screen, and Sano let out a sigh, a hint of frustration in his voice. "As I thought, combining these things doesn't get me a huge boost, but this skill is really effective against packs. I can just use it and win without lifting a finger." Shinoda, who was watching all this unfold, stared in disbelief. All those wolves, and he wiped them out with just one move? What kind of skill is that? Does such a skill even exist in this world? Could it be a super advanced technique? The more he thought about it, the more his mind raced with possibilities. Meanwhile, the older hunter, who had been saved, sighed in relief. "Thank you so much for saving us. You must be part of the rescue team sent by the association, right?" he asked. "Yeah." Sano nodded, not wanting to lie. "We came in a helicopter, so I guess you could say I'm part of the rescue team." The senior hunter, now looking slightly pale, turned to Sano. "In that case, I'm sorry, but would you mind letting him join you? It would be safer for him to go with you." At this, Shinoda immediately protested. "I don't want to. Even if I die, I want to stay here with you." "Senior." Sano glanced over at Shinoda, raising an eyebrow. "It would be safer for you to leave with me," the senior insisted. Shinoda stubbornly shook his head. "I don't want to leave alone." Looking at the tearful situation between the two, Sano felt like he had seen this scene in a movie before. "Oh, wow," he thought. "This feels like one of those scenes where, if the senior dies, I'll follow them into death, whether they stayed or left." Both of them were in danger, and Sano felt a little awkward. But then he realized that he had no other choice. I guess I'll just have to copy and paste, he muttered, since he also needed to find the Kalisha long sword. Sano immediately opened his inventory and pulled out a healing potion, handing it to the senior while explaining. This is a mid-level healing potion. You won't be able to fight, but it will restore enough stamina for you to move elsewhere. The senior, a little confused, turned to Sano and asked, "Why are you giving me such a valuable item?" "Because you need to survive and return with your junior," Sano said with a smile. Meanwhile, seeing the way Sano spoke and acted, Shinoda's eyes lit up in awe, like he was looking at his idol. So cool. That's so cool, he thought, and then sincerely added, "I really appreciate it. My name's Shinoda Satoru, guard of the dungeon. Please, at least remember my name. One day, I'll repay you for saving us." As he said this, Shinoda bowed deeply in gratitude. Sano, who had been walking ahead, stopped and turned around to ask, "By the way, could I ask you a favor?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I'm looking for the transport vehicle from the International Hunters Association. If it's not too much trouble, could you help me find it? I'm terrible with directions." As he said this, Sano couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. Shinoda, looking stunned, widened his eyes in disbelief. "Wait, what? A hunter who's bad with directions?" he exclaimed. Shocked, the scene shifts to Mor and Ares, where the demon bear in front of them has suddenly stopped attacking and collapsed onto the ground. "Are you putting it to sleep again?" Mor thought silently, observing the situation. "As a hunter, your approach really is a nonviolent method. You're quite thoughtful about these things," he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, a ball was thrown directly toward the two of them, but it didn't escape Mor's sharp eyes. His body immediately reacted, swinging his sword and slicing the ball cleanly in two. He then turned his gaze forward, a smirk forming on his lips. "Huh, you think you can take advantage of the chaos to steal the long Kalisha sword? Huh, I've seen people like you at exhibitions before." Mor taunted, calling out, "Come out, thieves!" Hearing this, a group of mysterious individuals wearing masks stepped out, no longer hiding their presence. One of them, the leader, spoke. "You're pretty sharp. Go ahead. Show us what you've got." Without hesitation, the leader charged toward Mor, aiming his sword at him. Mor quickly raised his own sword to block, his eyes narrowing. "Don't underestimate me," he warned. "I may just be escorting right now, but don't think someone like you can get past me." With that, Mor gathered his strength, pushing the masked leader back. "Come back here," Mor shouted, charging forward to attack. However, just as he moved, Ares seemed to sense something and shouted, "Mor, no!" But it was too late. Suddenly, Mor felt a sharp pain, causing him to collapse to his knees and cough up blood. "What's going on? Why am I?" he mumbled in confusion as he looked at his own condition. Ares quickly responded, worry etched on her face. "They're using some kind of item to prevent mana absorption for a period of time. It's a toxic item. If you keep fighting, you'll die." The masked figure calmly acknowledged her words. "This sorceress has good instincts. We don't look down on people. This is just how we do things." Hearing this, Ares's anger flared. "Is this how you act? Using an item banned by the International Hunters Association and shamelessly using it on someone else's body?" She glared at them, fury rising. "Fine. If it's like this, I'll make sure you live in regret and die without even having time to repent." As she spoke, light began to gather at her fingertips. Meanwhile, one of the sorcerers from the masked group quickly prepared a fireball, mocking Ares. "A sorcerer who can't use mana? What can you do with that? You should shut that mouth of yours and focus on swallowing dust." Another member of the group added, "We'll take care of the sword." However, right after that, the head of the sorcerer suddenly flew off, causing the others around them to panic. "What's going on?" they exclaimed. "Wait a minute," they added, their eyes shifting toward the demon bear, which had just woken up. It seemed that Ares had lifted the sleep spell she had cast on it, allowing the two groups to fight each other. The demon bear went wild, With just one swipe of its paw, countless masked figures were sent to meet their end. Even the dangerous-looking masked leader didn't dare face the massive creature directly. Damn it! This bear. They didn't kill it. They only put it to sleep? This is a nightmare. I have to get out of here, he thought as he immediately abandoned his mission to steal the legendary sword and fled faster than a dog. Meanwhile, the demon bear, after killing all the masked figures, turned its gaze toward Mor and Ares. Our turn now? Ares murmured. Mor asked, You can't make it sleep again, can you? Ares calmly responded, as if she didn't see the terrifying creature before her. You know we can't use mana now. Mor sighed. I knew you'd get us into trouble with your non-violent methods. Ares, looks like today's the day. Ares replied, You're right, but there's something you've got wrong. Mor. She then forcibly activated some kind of magic and charged straight toward the demon bear, causing Mor to gasp and shout, Ares, what are you doing? Ignoring Mor's shout, Ares continued her sprint, but after only a few steps, she suddenly coughed up blood, just like Mor had earlier. I knew it. I can't absorb mana, so I can't use my skills. Sorry, Mor. She silently apologized in her heart as the sharp claws of the demon bear came crashing toward her. However, at the most critical moment, suddenly, several strands of spider silk appeared in mid-air, shooting out in all directions, tightly binding the arm that was reaching toward Ares. Then, countless other strands shot from all sides, entangling the entire body of the demon bear, rendering it unable to respond no matter how much it struggled and roared. Finally, it was completely wrapped up like a cocoon and collapsed to the ground. Of course, the one responsible for this was Sano. Seeing the bear being so easily subdued, Shinoda quickly flattered. You took down that demon king in one hit. That's incredible. On the other side, Sano was still in disbelief. So I can really do that? Wow, Senior Sano, you're amazing. Shinoda praised again, causing the protagonist to widen his eyes. Since when did I become your senior? You two are the same age. Mor responded, then looked at Sano with admiration. You saved me and Senior Sakabe. Since that moment, you've been my senior in my heart. Sano, hearing this, sighed internally. Well, explaining to him now would be pointless. He then turned to check on the condition of the two in front of him. Are you both all right? You're members of the International Hunter Association, right? Hearing this, Ares looked slightly puzzled, while Mor used his sword to help himself stand. You're after the sword too. Huh, he said, eyeing Sano suspiciously. Seeing their reaction, Sano quickly raised his hands to clarify. No, I'm here to help protect the legendary sword with you too. In response, Mor pointed his sword directly at Sano. We just went through a sword robbery. Do you think I'll trust you? Sano, seeing that they still didn't trust him, looked around and noticed the bodies of the mysterious masked figures lying on the ground. He felt a sudden shock. So those bodies on the ground are? It seems like they tried to take the sword, but in the end, they were unlucky enough to be taken out by the Demon King Bear. I should thank the bear for that, he thought. But damn, this is tough. It feels like this guy is ready to swing his sword at me right away. As he thought this, it seemed like the legendary sword was waving goodbye to him. Just then, Shinoda stepped in to vouch for him. Hold on. Why are you two holding a grudge when he's helping? He's been assisting us, and now he's treated like a thief? He's a member of the Japan Hunter Association, and Senior Sakabe and I are the hunters responsible for managing this dungeon. Shinoda explained, pulling out his hunter's ID to prove it. The villain, hearing Shinoda's words, was secretly relieved. Nice. Great defense. Now, just a little push, and we've got this. Thinking this, to increase his credibility, Sano pulled out 2 bottles of recovery potions from his bag and handed them to Mor and Ares. Drink this now. Your injuries look serious. Don't hesitate. Just drink it. It's all part of the plan to replicate the Kalisha long sword. The investment is totally worth it. Sano smiled internally. For him, as long as he could replicate the sword, the cost didn't matter. Meanwhile, Ares, holding the potion in her hand, didn't rush to use it. Instead, she glanced at the trembling demon king bear still lying on the ground. At the same time, the sound of aircraft engines above drew the attention of everyone. It seemed that the rescue guild team had finally arrived. Sakabe spoke up. Looks like help is finally here. Meanwhile, Shinoda was visibly relieved. So we're really going to be saved. Huh? Sakabe responded. I'm not so sure. Sometimes hunters can be. He trailed off, hinting at the uncertainty of relying on the large guilds like the Great Sage Association. Meanwhile, the battle with the giant dragon Kaishia was still raging fiercely. Bolts of lightning were gathering in its mouth, preparing for another devastating attack. The hunter Ikegana urgently shouted from below. Stop attacking. Kaishia has entered Phase 3. It will unleash a wide-reaching firepower wave. Looks like the guild's support has arrived. Our goal now is to stall until all civilians are evacuated. Understood, the group responded in unison. Just then, an unfamiliar voice echoed. Are you all handling the dungeon collapse like this? It was the voice of a man with tattoos, long hair, and a rebellious appearance, looking like a gangster. Despite his rugged appearance, his identity was far from ordinary. He was Shirasaki Magato, a level 503 hunter and the leader of the Future Guild, a dark sorcerer. Seeing him appear, Nane's eyes narrowed. Why are you here? Why? Try guessing. Shirasaki replied with a smirk, pulling out a wand. What? Are you thinking of stopping me? Nanes? Realizing what he was about to do, Nanes gasped. You're not. But before she could finish, a red, dangerous magic circle appeared above Keishia's head. Nanes immediately shouted, Stop! If this spell doesn't bring it down, we'll... Shirasaki sneered and interrupted. If I worried about petty details like that, I wouldn't have achieved what I have today. The last time at Rainbow Bridge, only you and the association were stabilizing the dungeon. Let me tell you, that incident drove me mad. But this time, I'll deal with it myself and take all the loot. 100 Thunder, Shirasaki roared, and from the magic circle, dark lightning bolts shot into Keishia's body, making it roar in agony. Seeing this, Nanes quickly shouted to her team, Everyone, run! As she finished speaking, the dragon, in pain, crashed into the bridge, causing it to shake violently. Back with Sano, the impact threw him off the bridge. But luckily, he managed to grab hold of the edge just in time. Damn, that was close. He grumbled as he looked down below, where the other hunters and the transport truck he had used his webs to secure were still safe. Thank goodness. Everything's still secure, Sano thought, letting out a relieved sigh. However, just then, a heavy breathing sound caught his attention. He turned around, and what met his eyes was the massive head of Keishia, looming above him. Seeing himself just a few meters away from it, Sano gasped. Keishia! He quickly covered his mouth, trying to avoid waking the massive creature. At the same time, his mind raced, wondering how it was still here. Was it dead? No, it must have been captured. Shirasaki, the hunter, then landed from the sky. Seeing Sano standing next to Keishia in a daze, he raised an eyebrow. What's this? There's still someone alive here? You look like a low-level hunter, he said, cracking his knuckles. Sano, however, noticed the emblem on Shirasaki's clothing and quickly recognized it. That symbol. I've seen it before. It belongs to the Future Guild, ranked 3rd in the country. Thinking about it, Sano questioned. You seem to be from the guild that's here to help, but isn't your goal to rescue civilians and deal with the monsters escaping from the dungeon? Hearing this, Shirasaki glanced away dismissively and replied, Rescuing civilians and dealing with the monsters. Huh? Look over there. He gestured nonchalantly. The civilians have been evacuated, but I hear sounds that aren't from Keishia. The kind of annoying crying and wailing. With that, he flew toward the bound demon bear, which was still trapped by Sano's webs. Is this your doing? He asked, inspecting the webs. Is this the giant Spider King silk? I didn't expect you to use it like this. With a snap of his fingers, the demon bear was reduced to pieces, and the webs binding it were torn apart in an instant. Sano, watching this, felt a chill run down his spine. Shirasaki had not only effortlessly obliterated a Tier 2 monster, but had also lifted a 25-ton transport truck as though it were nothing. Could he be the one who captured Keishia? Meanwhile, as the demon bear was destroyed, several notifications popped up before Sano's eyes. Congratulations. You've leveled up. You've received rewards for defeating the demon bear. Before he could check the rewards, Sakabe, ever attentive, overheard the notification and turned to him. Huh? That was you who took down the beast earlier? Sakabe asked. Sorry. Looks like I took your kill. He shrugged nonchalantly. The web's in you. Low-level hunter. It wasn't my intention to activate the finishing blow and steal your reward. Sano's face darkened as Sakabe tossed him a bear claw, adding, Here's your reward. It's a bear claw from the demon bear. I don't need it, so you can have it. I'm not into stealing, though. Sano was furious, but before he could respond, Nane's voice interrupted. Sano, she called out. Sano turned toward her, momentarily halting his words. Meanwhile, Shirasaki, noticing the exchange, seemed irritated. You two know each other? He asked, clearly annoyed. So you're also part of the same guild? Nanes raised an eyebrow. Is something wrong? She asked. Sano gritted his teeth. No, nothing, he muttered, trying to keep his composure despite the growing tension. Hearing this, Nanes, though sensing something was off, didn't press the matter further. She continued, The rescue team is directing the evacuation. You should head over there. If that dragon wakes up, it will unleash a wide-area attack. Sano suggested. Then dealing with it now might be the best option. Right. However, Nanes shook her head slightly, explaining, Unfortunately, that's not possible. Boss monsters are classified based on their power levels. When their life force drops below 30%, they will use their ultimate abilities. These abilities come in two forms, Berserk Mode and Wide Area Attacks. Regardless of which ability it is, boss monsters start attacking wildly. Lower tier and mid-tier boss monsters usually enter Berserk Mode, and in such cases, you just need to be cautious. Berserk Mode doesn't necessarily require a separate stage. However, higher-tier bosses like Keishia have a huge life force, so they can use both Berserk Mode and wide-area attacks. Therefore, stabilizing them is a multi-stage process. Stage 3 begins when the boss monster perceives a threat to its life. It's rumored that they release extremely destructive attacks, wiping out everything in their surroundings. Keishia is currently in Stage 3. It's absorbing mana from the surroundings and creating a protective barrier. During this phase, no attack will be effective. At that moment, the massive dragon stirred, as if it had finished resting, and its eyes suddenly snapped open, causing the faces of both Sano and Nanes to change. Damn, it woke up earlier than expected, Nanes muttered. On the other hand, Shirasaki's excitement was palpable as he licked his lips. Perfect timing. When the shockwave is unleashed, I'll turn it into a trophy, he declared. Just as Nanes had described earlier, the moment the dragon awoke, it opened its mouth and let out a tremendous roar, releasing a shockwave that spread out in all directions. With no time to shield Sano, Nanes quickly turned to him, offering a brief reassurance. Hunter Sano, I'm planning to survive this shockwave. Shirasaki, sneering, added, Huh, how could he possibly survive? If a low-level hunter dies in a dungeon, it's no different from an ordinary person dying in a traffic accident. Don't blame us for that. With that, both Shirasaki and Nanes charged straight at the massive dragon, eager for the fight. Watching them, Sano quickly grabbed the demon bear's claw that had fallen to the ground and muttered, Guild Master of Future Guild, Shirasaki Masato, I didn't plan on this, but I'll take down Keishia before you do. You damn thief. Just wait. Shirasaki, I'm going to get my revenge first. He gritted his teeth and ran off. Sano quickly pulled up everyone who was stuck in the spider silk, and Shinoda, grinning, said, Hey, Sano, are you going to help us out again? Not paying much attention to Shinoda's words, Sano turned toward the two members of the International Hunter Association and made his request. I have something to ask both of you. We're in a pretty unfavorable situation. Kaishia has entered Stage 3, and it will soon launch a wide-area attack. When that happens, everyone here will be in danger, and it will be difficult to find the transport vehicle and retrieve the long sword. So, before that happens, I'll take Shirasaki's life. To do this, I need the Kalisha long sword. I promise I'll return it after taking down Kaishia. Upon hearing this, Moore flatly rejected the idea. How can you possibly defeat that monster? Even though you helped us before, it doesn't change anything. Why should we listen to your ridiculous story? Do you have any idea what the value of that sword is? This is impossible. Ares, standing beside Moore, nodded in agreement. No way. The sword is too valuable, and there's no way we're handing it over just like that. Sano wasn't surprised by their reactions. If they had agreed right away, it would have been strange. I expected as much, but if we keep going like this, the transport vehicle will be in danger. Ares suddenly started explaining further. To unlock the vehicle, we need an enormous amount of mana. Right now, we can't use mana because those thieves poisoned us. Moore turned to Ares as he spoke. Well, even if that's the case, Sano cut him off. Mana isn't a problem for me. If that's all, I can fix this easily. He continued. My alias in the dungeon is Mana Gopher. My ability is infinite mana regeneration. To prove his point, Sano began channeling mana into Ares, who immediately felt the power surging through her. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she could feel the mana flowing abundantly within her. And soon, the seals that had been placed on her were broken. The seals are gone. Thank you so much, Ares said gratefully. I promise I'll return the sword to both of you. Without wasting time, Sano quickly ran off. As he did, Moore, watching him, was still concerned. Ares, why did you agree to help him? What if something goes wrong? Ares calmly replied, Don't worry. He didn't kill the demon bear. He only tied it up. Moore sighed at her naivety. You've been moved by him, haven't you? This is really foolish. Meanwhile, Sano had reached the vehicle and opened the trunk. Feeling elated. Finally, the Kalisha long sword is mine, he thought, grinning ear to ear. But just as he thought he had succeeded, fate had other plans. Out of nowhere, a masked figure jumped out to disrupt him. My last attempt failed, and I lost my bearings for a while. But fortunately, I followed him. The figure chuckled, not giving Sano a chance to react before thrusting a dagger into his stomach. The sudden turn of events sent shockwaves through the group above, who cursed, Senior Sano, that bastard. The masked man, after confirming that the sword was inside the chest, couldn't believe his luck. I can't believe I got the sword so easily. As Sano collapsed, an ominous notification appeared. When the user loses their life, the spider silk of the giant Spider King will be deactivated. The moment the notification appeared, the spider silk holding the vehicle snapped, and the vehicle plummeted to the ground below. The masked man, still processing what had just happened, was startled when Sano's voice, a voice that should have belonged to a lifeless body, rang out from behind him. I also didn't expect to get the sword this way, Sano said with a sly grin. Before the masked man could react, Sano swiftly drew a sword from his inventory and drove it through the man's chest, mirroring the very attack he had suffered moments earlier. I'm the kind of person who never lets a grudge slide. An eye for an eye, Sano said coldly, pulling the blade out with force, sending the masked man crumpling to the ground like a defeated beast. Sano crouched slightly, grabbed the Kalisha long sword, and smiled triumphantly. I've saved up for this moment. You know, the Kalisha long sword I've always dreamed of is finally in my hands. His thoughts raced as a notification screen suddenly popped up in front of him. Do you want to copy the Kalisha long sword? Without hesitation, Sano clicked Ctrl+C, his excitement barely contained. But reality hit hard as the system threw up a blood-red notification. Your level is insufficient to copy this item. Sano's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His earlier confidence now felt like a cruel joke. What the hell? Level 30 is enough to equip the sword, isn't it? And I'm already level 50. Why is this happening? Sano muttered, his frustration escalating. Stop playing with me. System. While Sano was spiraling into a panic, the masked man, who was somehow still alive, chuckled weakly. Close one. Boy, I almost ended up smearing my guild's reputation in the dirt because of you. His words were followed by a swift, horizontal slash across Sano's back, sending him tumbling to the ground, writhing in pain. As Sano lay sprawled on the floor, the masked man stood tall, sneering. Humph. Without my healing skills, I'd already be a corpse. Let me return the favor from earlier. Shall I? Like you, I'm the kind of person who holds a grudge, 1,000 times over if I must. He tightened his grip on the Kalisha long sword. And to ensure you'll never see tomorrow's sunrise, I'll use your precious dream sword to finish you off. With those words, he plunged the blade into Sano's chest, causing the latter to cough up a mouthful of blood for the second time. Sano, lying there helplessly, could only curse his rotten luck. Damn it, I came so far for this. But as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a new notification appeared, surprising both Sano and the masked man. The Kalisha long sword has bonded with the wielder, copying and absorbing the sword's abilities. Sano's eyes, previously dull with exhaustion, lit up with newfound hope. What did it just say? Absorbing? The notifications kept rolling in, copying and absorbing the Kalisha long sword's level requirement. Copying and absorbing the Kalisha long sword's passive skill, plus 35% defense. Copying and absorbing the Kalisha long sword's first unique skill, Blood Drain. Copying and absorbing the Kalisha long sword's second unique skill, Berserk. Successfully absorbed all abilities of the Kalisha long sword. User's life force has fallen below 25%. Activating the sword's protective mode. Unique skill Berserk, forcibly activated. Control plus V. As the final notification echoed in his mind, the scene shifts to the battle with the dragon Kashia. At this moment, it has begun to open its mouth, gathering a massive energy orb within. Seeing this, Shirasaki grits his teeth and says, "It's activating a wide area attack. This situation is looking worse." As both of them still haven't figured out how to respond to the next incoming strike. Suddenly, from beneath the sea, a burst of light shoots up, heading straight for the dragon's throat. While Kashia is still focusing on gathering its energy and not paying attention, the beam of light pierces its body, splitting it in two, quite literally. Both Nanace and Shirasaki, witnessing this scene, are left in shock. Kashia has been defeated. The purge is complete. Time quickly passes, and the scene transitions to the headquarters of the Japan Hunter Association. Inside a conference room, the top brass of the Japanese hunter world are watching a news report. Today, at 4 p.m., the collapse of the Rainbow Dungeon occurred, causing numerous casualties and significant damage. The Hunter Association and various guilds immediately took action, and within 2 hours, the situation was brought under control. However, public outrage is now directed at the management office for its lax approach to overseeing the dungeon. Upon hearing this, a man in the room presses a button on a remote control, turning off the TV, then turns to the others and says, "Everyone, stop with those sour faces. Now, let's focus and discuss how Kashia was taken down." This big man, named Fuwa Takuo, is a priest and also the president of the Japan Hunter Association. In response, another man, bald with a fierce face who looks like a lone shark, speaks up. "I heard the association already purged the Rainbow Dungeon 3 months ago. Isn't that right?" He is Takeuchi Go, a level 701 swordsman and the president of the Midas Guild. Even with a purge, that doesn't guarantee it won't happen again. An elegant man with black hair shakes his head and replies, "That's right. The purge doesn't necessarily mean there won't be another incident." He is Shinoda Makoto, a level 610 healer and the president of the Dying Guild. As soon as he speaks, the group in the room begins banging their fists on the table and shouting, "Hey, Dying Guild, you guys should keep quiet. If the management had done their job properly, this wouldn't have happened." One man with dark hair grits his teeth and says, "Once everything is settled, we will definitely send a report about the transfer of management responsibilities for the Rainbow Dungeon." Amidst the chaos, Nanace, sitting on the side, begins to daydream about Sano. "I wonder if Hunter Sano managed to escape," she thinks. Meanwhile, the large Takeuchi slams his hand on the table, causing it to crack into several pieces. "What I want to know is how the last time a boss monster appeared was months ago, and if Nanace, who was present on the scene, couldn't handle Keishia, what then?" Hearing these words, Nanace shot a glance at him, then sighed deeply. With a calm motion, she placed her hand on the table and exerted her strength just once, causing the table to shatter into pieces. On the opposite side, Shirasaki quickly gathered his mana, creating a protective barrier around himself, leisurely sipping his drink as though it were none of his business. Meanwhile, the others stared in shock at Nanace, their voices trembling. What are you planning to do?" one of them asked. "This woman," Takeuchi muttered, his face turning red with veins bulging on his forehead. But before he could lose his temper, the voice of the association president, Fuwa Takuo, interrupted. "President Takeuchi, it seems one of my members has been a bit rude," he said calmly. "I apologize on her behalf." Hearing this, and not wanting to clash with Fuwa, the large Takeuchi could only click his tongue in annoyance, muttering, "TCH, such arrogance. If she keeps flaunting her power like that, she'll be dead before long." Turning back to Nanace, hearing the chaos from the other side, she sighed and decided to explain herself, hoping to shut them up. As they say, seeing is believing. If I want to convince you, it's better to show you directly. So please, don't misunderstand," she said. "The move I just executed is a reward for defeating Keishia earlier. It's called Shockwave. President Shirasaki, who also contributed to taking down Keishia, can vouch for me." At these words, Shirasaki, who had been drinking his tea leisurely, nearly choked in surprise. "Haha, well, I didn't really have time to check what the reward was, but I don't think she's lying," he said, though inwardly, he cursed. "Damn it, why did I get dragged into this?" Not knowing this, Fuwa, seeing that Shirasaki had become the temporary shield, smiled and said, "I see. In other words, thanks to President Shirasaki's contribution, the damage this time has been contained to this extent. Thank you for your dedication." Afterward, the group applauded Shirasaki, with cheers and praise coming from all sides, leaving him unsure whether to laugh or cry. "What the hell is going on?" he thought. "Is this?" As he thought about it, he glanced at Nanace, and upon seeing her smug smile, his teeth clenched in frustration. "She's still holding a grudge against me for interrupting her before. Hunter Nanace, I swear I'll get my revenge. And the bastard who stole Keishia from me, I will find them." He silently swore to himself. Returning to the main topic, after everyone had applauded Shirasaki for his contributions, Nanace glanced around the room and said, "As for the cause of the dungeon collapse, I will take full responsibility and investigate further myself. We also need to question the guilds for their delay in providing assistance." Upon hearing this, the people in the room shrank back, not daring to face her. Seeing their reaction, she continued, "Since it seems that I have everyone's attention, I will take my leave now." Just as Nanace was about to exit, the door to the meeting room suddenly opened, and two individuals, Moore and Ares, walked in. "Ah, perfect. It looks like the meeting is still ongoing," Moore said. "I come from the International Hunter Association, and I have an important announcement to make. Due to the recent dungeon collapse, the world's one and only Kalisha longsword has been stolen. The incident occurred during the transportation of the sword to the exhibition in Japan. We ask for everyone's cooperation in locating the sword as soon as possible." As he spoke, Moore placed a report on the table. Upon hearing this request, Takeuchi, the large man, raised an eyebrow and asked, "Wait a minute. When the transport vehicle was attacked, I heard that you all broke the seal on the vehicle, didn't you?" In response to his question, Ares adjusted her glasses and said, "Yes, we did. With the cooperation of Hunter Shinoda Sakuro from the Great Sage Guild and Sano Haruto from the Japan Hunter Association. Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes widened in shock. Even Shinoda, the older man, could only rub his face in acknowledgement. Shinoda, huh? He's a member of the Great Sage Guild, he muttered, turning back to the president of the Japan Hunter Association. After hearing the information, he quickly checked the membership details on his tablet and replied, "Among the members of the Japan Hunter Association, I see no reports on a hunter named Sano Haruto." At the same time, Nanace ground her teeth, and the look on her face didn't escape Shirasaki's watchful eyes. "Looks like the chance for revenge came sooner than I thought," he thought, and with that, he began to speak up. "Are you talking about the guy who tied up the royal beast king with the giant spider king's webs? On my way here, I saw him getting into some trouble, but I was strangely convinced that he was part of the Hunter Association. So, what does this mean? Hunter Nanace? You two seem to know each other, right?" As he spoke, he shot a smug glance at her. Meanwhile, in a different scenario, the Kalisha longsword had fallen into the hands of a man with black hair. His name was Hirosaki Takuni, a level 301 attacker and the president of the Black Blood Tower Guild. Looking at the sword in his hands, he couldn't help but let out a half-smile of satisfaction. This is the sword that supposedly helps its owner level up by 200, right? I guess it activates with a fingerprint lock. Spending hundreds of millions to stir up that dungeon was definitely worth it. Amazing. Upon hearing this, the masked leader was slightly taken aback. So, the guild president is really the one behind all of this. Huh, he thought to himself. Unaware of the masked leader's thoughts, Hirosaki turned to him and said, "By the way, it's unfortunate that you lost your teammates. I'm sorry. During our last operation, we encountered a peculiar fellow. But don't worry. I'm sure he's dead." "No, he's definitely dead," the masked leader, in a panic, replied. And upon seeing this reaction, Hirosaki tossed him a briefcase filled with money and nodded. "I understand. Good job. Your portion of the dead one's share is yours. Your reward is here. Once this is done, you're free to do whatever you like." "Thank you, President," the masked leader said with pleasure, clearly satisfied with the reward. However, this joy was short-lived. "No, this mission has failed," Hirosaki suddenly muttered. "This sword is only part of the deal. Who the hell would sell such a priceless sword for just $1 million? You had plans to profit from this legendary weapon, didn't you?" On the opposite side, the masked man immediately thought of something. His heart skipped a beat, and he yelled, "Wait a minute. The failure of the mission in our guild means immediate." He paused for a moment before shouting loudly, "You bastard! So it turns out, from the very beginning, you wanted to take us all down." After saying that, he quickly grabbed the money bag and jumped backward, trying to escape. However, no matter how fast he jumped, it couldn't compare to the speed at which Hirosaki struck. "The fewer people who know about this, the better," he muttered under his breath. "That money's enough to be sent as a token to the underworld." With his words barely finished, the villain casually swung his sword once, and the masked leader's body was sliced in half. At the same time, the durability of the Kalisha longsword dropped by 2 points, leaving it with only 8 points remaining. If nothing unexpected happened, it seemed like the sword could only be used 4 more times. With the unnecessary waste of one use, Hirosaki stroked his head, muttering to himself, "Ugh, if it gets destroyed before I can repair it, I'm in big trouble. You should remember, this is a gift from me." A voice echoed in Sano's head, causing him to suddenly wake up, as if he had just experienced a nightmare. At the same time, the hourglass tattoo on his neck throbbed with pain, making him grimace. "Damn it, the hourglass is starting to flow again?" Sano thought to himself. Seeing him awake, Shinoda rushed over, embracing him and crying out, "Senpai Sano, you finally opened your eyes. You were out for so long. I was so worried. I almost lost my mind." "I'm not about to die," Sano groaned. "It's not like that. No, after you finished off that monster." A giant beam of light suddenly shot up from the sea. It was like boom, blindingly bright. Shinoda explained, recounting the dramatic scene. Nearby, another patient overheard and, intrigued, sat up to ask, "You were at the Rainbow Dungeon, right?" "Yes, I was. Me, Senpai Sano, and someone else," the rookie cheerfully responded, turning to explain. "Let me tell you everything that happened. It was like, blah blah. And then what happened?" As they were chatting, Sano felt a headache coming on and decided to step outside, muttering to himself, "I'm clearly not on the same wavelength as him." But then he overheard someone say, "That person saved you. Though, Sano, you're welcome." "Shinoda Makoto?" Sano asked, slightly confused. "That's right," said the rookie. "He said he would save you no matter what. Even pressed the reconnaissance team from the Great Hero Guild and caused a big commotion. Then we found you unconscious by the beach." Sano was still in disbelief. "Wait, did you say Shinoda Makoto and Shinoda Satoru?" "No way." The rookie looked at Sano, who seemed perplexed, but then shook his head. "No way. This isn't a drama show." Meanwhile, in the office of the Hunter Guild's president, Moore and Ares were explaining things further. "Is that so?" Moore asked. "Sano the Hunter is dead? I see now," Nanae said coldly. "Yes, I was involved in that incident, but you don't seem very surprised," Moore replied, noticing Nanae's nonchalant attitude, which also left him a bit stunned. Why wasn't she affected by the news at all? Turning back to Nanae, it was as if she could sense the question in his mind, so she immediately explained. "Hunters are the kind of people who are always teetering on the edge of death." Back in the association president's office, after hearing everything, he concluded, "Well, then, I've confirmed the cooperation request. The truth is, members of the Japan Hunter Association were involved in this incident. We will lend our full support in the process of locating the long-sword Kalisha." Upon hearing his reassuring words, the four-eyed woman added, "In that case, please send some high-level hunters here to assist us. We have pinpointed the direction of the sword's location." At this, Fua's eyes widened in surprise. "When I first saw you two, I had high expectations, but I didn't expect you to be able to track its location. Is that some kind of tracking magic?" In response to the question, Ares shared a bit more. "The long sword Kalisha isn't a fixed item. It's engraved with a unique pattern that identifies the rank of its user. I can sense and track that pattern. In fact, about an hour ago, someone used the sword." Hearing this, Nanae began to understand a few things. Before this, there was no information suggesting they could track that engraving, she thought. So that's why they allowed Hunter Sano to use the sword. Huh. Without missing a beat, Ares continued. "Before it was stolen, the sword's durability was about 10 points. But since it's already been used, its durability will undoubtedly decrease. If this continues, well," she trailed off. "But it was enough for everyone to understand the outcome of the sword. It would soon disappear from the world, wouldn't it?" The only clue left was to find Ares' mother, who had gone missing in the great disaster 15 years ago. Nanae frowned and said, causing Ares across from her to flinch. Meanwhile, Moore sat there, confused and oblivious to what was going on. To clarify further, Nanae pulled out a confidential file containing information about both Moore and Ares. "Do you think I became team leader just by luck?" she said. "We know that the lost treasure sword is your mother's heirloom." Hearing this, Ares didn't hide it anymore and laid everything bare. "Hunter Nanae, I beg you again, please help me recover my mother's heirloom." Time quickly passed by, and as Nanae walked down the hallway, she still felt something was off. Moore and Ares, those two were definitely hiding something. She didn't believe the story they told about Hunter Sano. She didn't think he was the kind of person who would easily lose his life. She silently thought to herself. At that moment, a voice suddenly called out from behind her. "Hunter Nanae, why do you look so serious? Working overtime?" The voice belonged to Uncle Shinoda, and upon hearing him, Nanae momentarily pushed aside her thoughts. "No, nothing special. Do you need something?" Shinoda didn't waste time and got straight to the point. "Nanae, it's time for you to return to the Great Sage Guild." Upon hearing this, Nane sighed deeply and replied, "The number of dungeons continues to increase. Yet those who should manage them are off starting their own companies, only caring about personal pleasures and focusing on making money from dungeons. As for the collapse of this dungeon, if it turns out to be a result of the Great Sage Guild's negligence, the entire guild will be held responsible. That's why I won't go back. Besides, there's still so much to do in the association." "Old man," she said coldly. After hearing this, Shinoda seemed to sense that this wasn't the right time to bring up certain matters. So he chuckled and said, "Haha, actually, I have another matter I'd like to discuss with you. Looks like I said something unnecessary. Well, before you leave, please stop by the hospital at the center." The scene shifts to the rooftop of the Hunter's Hospital. At this moment, Sano was checking his status after the chaotic battle. Sano Haruto, level 79. Health, 203. Energy, 135. Basic defense, 150. Plus 35%. Skill level, 2. Profession level, 9. Looking at his current stats, the main character nodded to himself and muttered, "The Kalisha Long Sword. I can't replicate its actual form, but at least I can absorb all its power. I was thinking about what to do next because even if I could copy it, how would I use it in battle? Clearly, this is much better. And on top of that, the skill Berserk activated at just the right moment." As he spoke, his eyes sparkled with excitement. Berserk, that's the second special move of the Kalisha Long Sword. It doubles the level and all skills of the user for 1 minute, and its cooldown time is 1 day. The activation condition is when the user's health drops below 25%, forcing the skill to activate. It activates just before death, so it's painful as hell. But it's also how I was able to take down Keishia, a monster above level 400. He remembered the scene clearly. After the dragon pig perished, a series of notifications popped up in front of him. "You have received a reward for defeating Shirasaki. You have absorbed the shockwave of Keishia using Control plus C. Control plus C completed. The shockwave of Keishia has been absorbed and turned into the frequency resonance skill. The shockwave of Keishia has been absorbed into the natural wave skill. The giant spider king's web has reached level 2. You can now use frequency resonance and natural wave simultaneously while using the giant spider king's web." Back to Sano, thinking about the things he'd gained from the dragon. He couldn't help but chuckle, making the people in the elevator with him feel a bit awkward. They were wondering what was wrong with him. He hadn't expected that his copy-paste skill would evolve to the point where he could absorb and combine skills. He had already used the frequency resonance skill before, and it was truly powerful. "Right now, I'm already a senior hunter. Level 276, he thought to himself. The more he thought about it, the louder his laughter became, causing those around him to tremble in fear and glance at him nervously. Unaware of this, Sano remained smug as he thought to himself, "Now all I need to do is find the guy who stabbed me. As long as I get my hands on the Kalisha Long Sword." Just as he was thinking this, a voice suddenly reached his ears. "Hey, why are you making me worry like this? I told you, if things get dangerous, just run." Upon hearing this, Sano poked his head out to check and realized the voice belonged to none other than Hunter Nanace. When he spotted her, he quickly recoiled, startled. So, Nanace had this side to her too. But who was she talking to? Or more specifically, how did she end up at this hospital? Across from her, the person talking was none other than the rookie Shinoda. At this moment, he was pointing at the bandage on his head and retorting, "It's your fault. You didn't properly secure the dungeon. And look what happened." The young man accused her, causing Nanace to fall silent in frustration. Meanwhile, Sano, who was hiding to the side, felt like a thunderbolt had struck him straight in the brain. "Wait, now that I think about it, both of them are named Shinoda. I thought it was just a coincidence, but I had no idea they were siblings. Who knows?" Shinoda snapped back, but upon hearing this, Sano's heart skipped a beat. "Is she looking for me?" he thought. "What if she's figured out I impersonated a member of the association to steal the sword? Damn it, I can't let her find me. First, I need to grab the long sword back." With that thought, Sano quickly turned around, ready to leave the hospital. But just as he turned, he collided with someone else. So, you're still alive. Huh. You sword thief? Moore said, his face dark as a pot bottom. Meanwhile, Sano broke into a cold sweat, feeling like he was about to die. Crap. This is bad, he thought, forcing a nervous chuckle as he realized he'd been caught red-handed. Moore grabbed Sano by the collar and shoved him into the wall, causing large cracks to appear in the surface. You damn scoundrel, Moore growled, his voice dripping with anger. You tricked me good, didn't you? Pretending to be a member of the association. Wait, it's a misunderstanding. Sano quickly tried to explain. Even though he knew he was guilty of planning to steal the sword, he just hadn't succeeded. But of course, Moore wasn't listening to any excuses. Misunderstanding? You were stabbed, but you're still standing here, Moore said, his anger escalating. You two must have been conspiring together. Huh. As he spoke, his face grew even darker, and it was hard to argue with his logic. Sano, unable to defend himself, just stood there quietly. Looks like he's not going to listen to me. This isn't good. Determined to teach Sano a lesson, Moore immediately drew a sword from his bag. The sight made Nanase, who was standing behind, rush to intervene. Moore, what are you doing? Drawing your sword here? Don't worry, Moore replied. I won't use any skills. I just want this scam artist to feel some consequences for his actions. I can't let him get away with it. Without saying another word, Moore thrust his sword directly at Sano. Faced with this situation, although he didn't want to, Sano had no choice but to use his trump card, a skill he had just acquired. Damn it, I really don't want to use this skill here, but I have no choice, he muttered. Then, he activated the resonance wave, a skill he had absorbed from Keisha. He extended his hand directly towards Moore's sword, and after a clash, his hand struck the sword, shattering it into pieces with incredible force. The sound of the impact caught the attention of Nanase and Shinoda, who were still talking behind. Senior Sano, Shinoda exclaimed, while Nanase's face froze. Realizing something, she recognized the skill that Sano had just used. It was Keisha's resonance wave. But how could Sano, a hunter, have that skill? Furthermore, his aura seemed completely different from before. Meanwhile, at a concert elsewhere, a short-haired girl was energetically performing for the audience. She was Erita Sarah, a member of the girl group IF. Great job, her fellow members waved and said as they waved goodbye to her. Erita quickly hopped into her sports car, revving the engine as she sped off. The other members, who had to travel by company car, watched in envy. Looks like Erita's from a rich family. Just look at her car. Must be nice, one of them said. I wish I could drive a cool sports car like that home, another mused. However, they didn't know that Erita hadn't driven far before a car suddenly swerved in front of her, forcing her to slam on the brakes. Luckily, her car's brakes were responsive enough to prevent a collision. She quickly rolled down the window and shouted at the reckless driver. Hey, what's wrong with you? Where are you looking when you're driving? The driver, Hirosaki, stepped out of the car, holding the box containing the legendary sword. Seeing him, Erita's face immediately changed. He slammed the sword box onto the hood of her car and said, How was your performance? Let's head to the dungeon, shall we? If you want everything to go back to normal, you'll have to follow me. He smiled coldly. Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted from the building where Hirosaki had previously lived. Now, it was completely reduced to a pile of ruins. The group, following Ares, arrived at the location, but unfortunately, Hirosaki had disappeared long ago, as if he had vanished from history. Is this the place? The one where the Kalisha longsword was last used? Nanase asked, puzzled, looking around. But there's nothing here. Ahead of her, Ares placed her hand on the ground and checked carefully before shaking her head. Looks like we arrived too late. Hearing this, Nanase asked again, So, we just have to wait until that person uses the sword again? After she said that, the group fell into a heavy silence, unsure of what to do next, since the only clue they had was now lost. Then, After a moment of thought, Sano suddenly remembered something and shouted, "Ah, the Blood Tower. Yes, I remember now, the culprit. When he tried to eliminate me, he mentioned that name. He said he was from the Blood Tower Guild." In response, Nane's eyes widened with surprise as she replied, "I've never heard of this guild. It sounds like a secret dark guild." Returning to Sano, even Nanes, who could find out classified information about Morin Ares, had never heard of this name, which made Sano feel a bit incredulous. He couldn't believe that there was a chance Nanes had never heard of it. Meanwhile, Mor, who had been quiet until now, reminded them, "If we have to wait for that, there's no guarantee the sword will last much longer." Upon hearing this, Ares' expression became more thoughtful, but as if a thought crossed her mind, Nanes, though somewhat reluctant, spoke up, "No need to wait. We only need what we want. I know someone who is very familiar with this kind of information." Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted to a memory of the singer Erita. The moment was set during the Great Disaster that occurred 15 years ago. "I gained this skill during the Great Disaster 15 years ago. A mysterious creature bestowed it upon me. At first, I thought I was just awakening the abilities of a normal hunter, but it turned out to be something else entirely. I had acquired a mysterious skill. Control plus Z. This skill allows me to return a target to its previous state. Control plus Z. Like the keyboard shortcut to reset an object to its original state. It's a skill that works on both people and things. To make use of this, I began collecting luxury goods that were broken or considered waste, restoring them, and then selling them in their original state. Although it wasn't a healing or restoration skill, I still made money by fixing things. However, the amount of money I could earn with this skill was limited. I needed a lot more money. Then, my body got caught up in the disaster, and I was left unconscious in a hospital under deplorable conditions. I tried to restore others to their previous states, but I needed mana to use my skill. Without mana, the best I could do was heal small wounds. Mana is a type of energy that only hunters can control. So, to get some mana, I risked my life with other hunters and ventured into the dungeon. As a baggage carrier and, when necessary, a healer. Going into the dungeon was like walking into the tiger's den for someone like me who hadn't yet awakened their hunter abilities. It was full of lurking dangers. But what hurt me the most was the disdain I received from others in the team. It was like when I asked them for mana, they looked at me with contempt. "Mana for thanks? What is this? You're asking for mana from me?" There were times when they came close to death, and I was exhausted from this skill. I just wanted to give up everything. The more I thought about it, the more I felt humiliated, and tears began to fall down my face. Then, suddenly, a voice rang out next to me. "How interesting. Heh, they say you're going around asking for mana. Is that true? Is your side hustle stealing?" It was the moment I met Kurosaki Takumi. Returning to the present, in the tiny rental room where the singer Erita lived, Kurosaki glanced around and remarked with a mocking tone, "This room is downright pitiful. Where on earth did all the money you earned go? I mean, who would have thought that Sarah from If, someone so famous, would be living in a dump like this? I bet no one could imagine you ordering takeout for every meal and eating whatever you want. You must be living quite comfortably. Huh, aren't idols supposed to obsess over dieting and desperately maintaining their figures? But you, no matter how much you eat, you can just reset yourself back to normal. Well, lucky you, I guess." He smirked before continuing. "I still remember the first time we met. Even when someone dropped dead right in front of you, all you could think about was stealing something valuable from them. Honestly, you and I, we're the same kind of person." Hearing this, Erita's eyes locked on him with a furious glare, but Kurosaki seemed completely unbothered. He went on, as if to clarify, "Let me be clear. If we're going to continue this contract, I don't care if your business involves the idol industry or not." Erita, now visibly annoyed, let out a deep breath, set her food aside, and asked sharply, "Then why are you asking me to go into the dungeon right now? Can't you just collect enough mana and hand it over to me as usual?" In response, Kurosaki casually opened the box holding his legendary sword and revealed it to her. I want you to restore this sword to its original state, he explained. But it'll require a massive amount of mana. You know that. And no, it can't be done here. Which is why this will be your last time entering a dungeon. Closing the box with a click, he looked at her firmly. Erita, confused by what he was implying, blinked and asked, "Wait, are you saying that?" "Exactly," he interrupted with a nod. "Just as I promised before." Hearing that, Erita's eyes widened in shock. "You found an infinite mana regeneration item? And it's inside that dungeon?" Kurosaki shook his head, quickly crushing her rising hope. "No," he clarified, "but there's a chance it might appear if you go in. Look, I know our contract says that you'll avoid dungeons as much as possible, but just this once. This will be the last time you enter a dungeon with me. And trust me, the reward will be worth it. Don't you agree?" His persuasive tone caused Erita's expression to waver, her face reflecting a mix of hesitation and contemplation. The scene shifted to the headquarters of the Future Guild, led by Shirasaki. At that moment, Nane's group arrived, looking to gather more information about the mysterious Blood Tower Guild. As they walked, Sano broke the silence with a question. "You mentioned someone who knows all the insider information? Are you talking about Guild Master Shirasaki? The guy from the Future Guild who's always in the news for stealing stuff?" "That's right." Nanes nodded in confirmation. "But wait," Sano continued, his tone puzzled. "Shouldn't the top guilds in the country be Midas Guild and Grand Sage Guild? Why would we be going to this guy instead?" Hearing this, Nanes paused for a moment, then turned to explain. "At the very least, they possess the most comprehensive intelligence on dungeon purges and exceptional management skills. The entire association knows this. His desire to conquer dungeons surpasses anyone else's." Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted to the office of Guild Master Shirasaki Masato. At this point, the group successfully met the tattooed young man and obtained some crucial information from him. The heart of the giant elf, Shirasaki revealed, causing the group to gasp in astonishment. "That's right," he continued. "It's also known as the Infinite Mana Regeneration item." Shirasaki nodded affirmatively. "That's an incredibly rare item," Moore commented, his voice heavy with disbelief. "It appears in the Snowy Elf Mountain dungeon," Shirasaki confirmed. "You're talking about the reward item from the hidden boss in the Giant Elf dungeon?" Nanes asked again. Seeking clarity, Shirasaki shot her a confident look before responding. "Exactly. And to locate this item, we mobilized an entire scouting team to gather intel. That's when we ran into them, the Blood Tower Guild that Sano mentioned. I've never even heard of their existence until now," Shirasaki admitted, leaning back in his chair. "But from what we've discovered, the Blood Tower Guild plans to send people for a purge mission at the Snowy Elf Mountain. It seems they're also recruiting more manpower for this." With that, Shirasaki handed them a recruitment flyer, pointing to the details printed on it. The group leaned in to read. Recruitment notice. A location, Snowy Elf Mountain Dungeon. A number of positions, 30. A required level, 90+. Equipment, optional. A reward distribution, 1/n. A contact number, a cryptic 11-digit sequence. A recruiter, Blood Tower Guild. "This is all the information we've managed to gather so far," Shirasaki said, his voice heavy with frustration. "But these guys, they're worse than you can imagine. They steal and assassinate without discrimination, whether their targets are influential individuals or dungeon purging teams. And because they're a black guild, they don't care about being labeled as a vile tool for others to use." The more Shirasaki spoke, the more his expression hardened. His brows knitted tightly together, and his eyes gleamed with a mixture of anger and resolve. Meanwhile, Sano appeared somewhat skeptical, pondering over the item. An artifact capable of infinite mana regeneration. "I don't really need it myself, but it's definitely something that opens your eyes to new possibilities. Clearly, someone wants to monopolize it. But if anyone really does possess that item, what does it have to do with the Kalisha Greatsword? Did they steal the sword to slay the giant elf? But its durability is already nearing its limit. Could that artifact be more valuable than the sword? No, there's no way." The more Sano thought about it, the more his head ached, unable to make sense of the intentions behind the enemy's actions. Turning back to Nanase, the huntress listened intently to Shirasaki's explanation before responding. So, what you're saying is, the Blood Tower Guild is ultimately after the heart of the giant elf? Is that why they're assembling a team to clear the Snowy Elf Mountain dungeon? In response, the bespectacled woman beside her shook her head firmly. I don't think that's the case. Ever since that hidden dungeon was discovered 15 years ago, no one has ever seen that artifact. Ares, standing nearby, caught Sano's attention as he began to ask, "How can you be so sure?" Before he could finish, Ares cut him off. "I can't explain in detail, but I was deeply fascinated by that dungeon at one point. I even did my own research on it." She paused briefly, her gaze steady as she continued. "After all, the Snowy Elf Mountain dungeon is notoriously difficult to conquer. It's one of those infamous places hunters prefer to avoid. There are always some groups of hunters who occasionally seek out hidden dungeons, but when it comes to this one, most give up before they even get close." Turning back to the tattooed Shirasaki, his face lit up with a spark of eager excitement. "There's definitely something in that dungeon that's making even veteran assassins band together into teams, right? Even if it's not a hidden dungeon, there's got to be something significant inside." On the other side, Sano chimed in. "So, when are they planning to depart?" "I have no idea," Shirasaki replied with a shrug. "The recruitment's already finished, so they might have already set out by now." Hearing this, Sano frowned in frustration, his expression tightening. "I knew it. They've been planning this for ages, even before they devised their scheme to steal the sword." Meanwhile, the hunter Nanase, upon learning this, felt a surge of urgency rising within her. "Then we need to head there immediately," she declared. Without hesitation, she turned to the tattooed man and proposed, "President Shirasaki, your attack squad can mobilize right away, can't they? You've got a team ready, right?" "Huh? No, not really. I don't have one," Shirasaki stammered in surprise. But Nanase wasn't buying it for a second. "I'm sure the Future Guild always has an attack team on standby for orders, one that can rival even the association's attack squads. Isn't that right?" Facing her determined gaze, Shirasaki didn't deny it outright. However, he was clearly hesitant. "Hunter Nanase, you know as well as I do, information about hidden dungeons isn't always reliable. Why would anyone willingly walk into a place like that? In such a harsh environment, it's almost impossible to take down an entire army of goblins." He shook his head, clearly reluctant. And yet, despite his protests, Shirasaki somehow found himself roped into their plans. Grumbling under his breath, he muttered, "Damn it, somehow I got dragged into this." At that exact moment, towering stone golems loomed ahead of them, their glowing red eyes shining like car headlights. These creatures were level 40 stone fiends. Description: as their self-defense mechanisms and cognitive abilities diminish, the number of golem they summon increases and regenerates continuously, unless their core is destroyed. As soon as the enemies confronted each other, there was no need for words. The moment they locked eyes, both sides grabbed their weapons and charged at each other, ready to test the limits of their strength. In one corner of the battlefield, a young man from the group swung his sword with precision, slicing straight through the arm of a stone golem. The severed hand dropped with a heavy thud. But, just as described by the system, the limb regenerated almost instantly, as if it had never been cut. The golem retaliated, slamming its massive arm down with crushing force, causing the team to scramble to raise their shields and block the impact. Watching the seemingly endless regeneration of the stone fiends, Shirasaki clicked his tongue in annoyance. "At this rate, we'll be stuck here forever. Destroy their cores already and get this over with." With that, he unleashed his magic, summoning streaks of black lightning from his wand. The crackling bolts tore through the stone golems, blasting them into the air. Shirasaki didn't stop there. He manipulated the arcs of lightning to hurl the golems into each other, creating a chaotic collision. Then, with one decisive strike of overwhelming firepower aimed at their center, he obliterated both the golems and their cores. sending the creatures straight to their demise. Satisfied with the results, Shirasaki turned to the rest of the team. Focus on destroying the cores of every single golem coming at us. Stay behind me and take down as many as you can. Yes, Captain, a young member of the group responded enthusiastically. Beside him, another teammate was busy collecting fragments of the shattered energy cores, grinning as he worked. Feels like hitting the jackpot. Huh, he said with a laugh. Meanwhile, Shirasaki continued to unleash streams of black lightning, striking down one monster after another with relentless efficiency. His movements were fluid, almost effortless, as he summoned and hurled the bolts with precision. Sano, watching this display from the sidelines, could only shake his head in exasperation. For someone who said they didn't want to come, he sure looks like he's having a great time. But still, gotta admit, it's impressive. The guy takes them down in a single blow. As he observed the scene, Sano recalled the advice from the bespectacled girl earlier. Once inside the Snow Goblin dungeon, you need to take down as many golems as you possibly can. With a determined look, he readied himself for the task ahead. Hearing this, Sano felt a bit confused and turned to ask. Usually, in dungeons, you can fight as many monsters as you want. So what's the reason behind this? There's a reason, the girl with glasses replied. It's the condition to encounter the mid-level boss in the Snow Goblin dungeon. Based on my research, this dungeon is a censor dungeon. Sano, who had stayed at level 30 for 5 years and obviously had no knowledge of this, asked, a censor dungeon? What's that? Before Ares could explain, Shirasaki stepped in and clarified. I was getting to that. This dungeon is tricky, very tricky. Dungeons with hidden areas usually work this way. A normal dungeon is typically divided into different regions, small zones, intermediate zones, and endgame zones. If you know the path, you can head straight to the final boss area. However, in a censor dungeon, the condition for unlocking the next area is a formula. A plus B plus C equals D. He paused for effect and continued. Basically, you need to defeat all the small monsters before the mid-level boss will even appear. If you fail to defeat the mid-level boss, the final boss won't spawn, and the dungeon will fail. If you don't meet one of the necessary conditions, the rest of the areas won't even show up. The four-eyed girl chimed in with her own theory. I suspect this is due to the catastrophe that happened 15 years ago. It likely disrupted the dungeon's process, which is why the hidden area has never appeared until now. So, the condition for the mid-level boss to appear is to defeat as many small monsters as possible? Sano asked again. Ares nodded in agreement and explained. Exactly. Since we don't know how to reset the dungeon, we have to be extremely careful. Based on my research, this is the most plausible approach. Moreover, we need to act quickly. If the reward from the monster is the key needed to unlock the next area, then what they're really after is that key. So, we need to secure the key to the hidden dungeon before they do. Back to the present, Sano clarified his goal. Whatever their ultimate goal is, I don't care. I just need to find the Kalisha longsword and return it. With that, he activated his copying skill, creating countless strands of thread that wrapped tightly around the stone golem's body. He then used his signature move, Ctrl+V, combining it with the giant Spider King's webbing technique. The result was that the threads vibrated intensely and crushed the stone golem into countless pieces. Meanwhile, the rest of Sano's team, who had no trouble handling a stone golem like that, glanced at each other, and one of them spoke up. Hey, was that the giant Spider King's web from the low-level dungeon? Another teammate chimed in with a guess. It sure looks like it, but can that useless thing really have this much power? Without replying to them, over in another corner, Ares was using her magic to freeze 4 or 5 stone golems in front of her, rendering them completely immobile. She then shouted, "More!" Hearing this, the swordsman understood the command and rushed forward, gripping his sword tightly to strike down on the stone statues. They didn't even have a chance to react before their magical stone bodies were shattered. While they were cleaning up these golems, the rest of the team was still struggling to deal with their own stone golems. Damn, these things are tough. We should fall back. someone suggested. But just as they turned around, one of the stone golems slammed its massive fist down, causing the ground to tremble violently. The shockwave sent the group flying in different directions. Seeing this, Nanes, the huntress, rushed to assist. She gently placed her hand on the stone golem's body, then activated her skill, Living Shockwave of Kashia. Instantly, a shockwave surged from her palm, directly impacting the golem's hardened body. The result? The golem's body was punctured, and large chunks of stone scattered in all directions. After finishing, Nanes turned to ask the group, "Is everyone all right?" "Yes, Captain. Thank you, Captain," the team replied. At the same time, a member in a blue outfit, after seeing Nanes, hesitated and quickly turned his head away, avoiding eye contact. This caught Nanes' attention. "Wait, you're Shinoda Satoru," she exclaimed, recognizing him. "What? How did you get here? What are you doing here?" She shouted when she realized her younger brother, who had somehow slipped into the group unnoticed, was participating in this raid. Ahead of her, the weak, clueless young man responded to her concern. What's wrong? Am I not allowed to come? I'm here as a member of the senior team squad." "You're a member of the squad?" Nanes gasped in surprise. She couldn't understand how someone at level 30 would sneak into the team to potentially get himself killed. To explain this, we need to go back in time a little. Shinoda had been recovering in the hospital for a while. Somehow, upon hearing about the upcoming raid, he suddenly started throwing a tantrum, crawling around on the floor, begging Sano, "You're going into a dungeon? I'm going too. I'm going too," he cried like a child, throwing a fit. This left Sano confused, wondering if the kid had lost his mind. "You're going alone? What if something happens? What if you get lost in the dungeon?" Shinoda, crying and trying to explain his value to the team, managed to convince Sano, despite his apparent lack of skills. Shinoda argued that he had a role to play. Sano, after some consideration, finally agreed to let him join the mission. "But you're joining my team, not the attack squad," Sano made it clear. "With your defenses, you'll probably get knocked out with one hit from those golems." Shinoda, understanding his own limitations, quickly agreed. "Of course, I'll join your squad." Back in the present, when Nanes learned that Shinoda had been recruited into the raid team by Sano himself, she felt a headache coming on. "What is that hunter Sano Haruto thinking?" she muttered to herself. "He's just a low-level hunter too." She sighed deeply. As soon as she finished speaking, Shinoda, noticing his older sister's dismissal of his idol, puffed up in defense. "Don't look down on Sano. I saw it clearly. Both you and the president, Shirasaki, didn't cut down the monster. It was Senior Sano who did," he quickly reminded her. Nanes was caught off guard, recalling the battle earlier when Sano had used his skills. "That's right," she thought. "Sano Haruto is so different from when we were in that spider cave. And the skill he was using, it was definitely Kashia's shockwave. So, what Satoru said was true, but how could it be?" The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. At the same time, in another part of the dungeon, the team led by the villainous Kurosaki was focused on taking down as many golems as they could. "How are we doing this?" someone asked. And Kurosaki answered, "We're clearing the dungeon." Of course. He scanned the group of hunters, particularly Nanes' team, who were using a strategy of overwhelming fewer enemies with more hunters. Every 4 to 5 hunters would form a group to surround a single stone golem and begin attacking. Meanwhile, Kurosaki and his ally, Erita, were taking a more passive approach, resting, drinking, and observing the others do the work. We've infiltrated this chaotic raid, using invisibility to hide and steal the opportunity for critical strikes, as well as mana and items, Kurosaki explained. Erita frowned and said, "Even with invisibility, high-level hunters like Nanes or the president of the Future Guild can still detect us. They aren't afraid of anyone, so they don't focus on stealth training. On the other hand, we often find ourselves in situations where we need to strike weak against strong. So we've honed our invisibility and weapon concealment skills to their highest level. It's rare for us to be detected. Kurosaki nodded in agreement. It's efficient and relaxing work. That's the motto of our Blood Tower Guild, he said with a smirk. Kurosaki, pausing for a moment, asked, is there any issue with mana conversion? That mana generator is a luxury. After all, to fill up even one bar, you'd need to defeat at least 100 small monsters. Erida glanced at the sword next to her and responded, I know. Last time, the reconstruction of the Intreon dungeon cost 10, right? What I'm curious about is how much mana it takes to repair this sword. This sword? Kurosaki replied with a smirk. It's double what it was last time. Erida raised an eyebrow. So, to restore the sword, we have to defeat the dungeon's boss? Kurosaki nodded and chuckled wickedly. That's right. They say there's a massive barrier in the dungeon, and the only weapon that can break it is the Kalisha longsword. Erida's intuition kicked in, and she couldn't help but ask, how do you know this information? Kurosaki, as if not wanting to answer, abruptly ended the conversation. Why are you asking so many questions today? Just focus on restoring the sword and picking up the dropped items. It's been a while since I entered a dungeon, so I'm a little worried, he added. This strategy is a bit underhanded, though. Erida sighed. Well, that's true, but it still works. Despite agreeing, Kurosaki was visibly annoyed by her words. He shot her a glare, prompting Erida to shrug and respond. Don't mind my words. As long as the contract is in place, I don't care about your methods. She reminded herself, I'm gathering items for infinite mana restoration. If it can help my parents, I'll do whatever it takes. Meanwhile, Sano and his team, unaware of the strange activities of Kurosaki's group, were still grinding away. Damn it, we must have killed at least 200 of these things by now. When will this end? Sano muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead as he sliced through a stone golem in front of him. From its body, a round core with a red flame flew out, catching Sano's attention. What's this? He muttered. Noticing that this core was different from the previous ones, he decided to copy and paste it before shattering it. But just as he was about to act, the core suddenly sank into the ground, leaving Sano unable to react in time. What the? It just went into the ground, he exclaimed. Shirasaki, landing behind Sano, spoke with a certain calm. It's starting. Starting? Starting what? Sano asked, puzzled, glancing back at him. We've finished hunting the stone golems. Shirasaki replied coolly. Next, the mid-tier golem will appear. Welcome to the middle stage of the Snow Elf Mountain. As he spoke, his eyes shifted to one side, where pieces of rock began to gather and collide with one another. Slowly, they formed into a massive figure that towered over the group, a colossal golem taking shape before their eyes. The air grew tense as the golem's form solidified, and Sano couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. He gripped his weapon tighter, ready for the challenge ahead. Guess it's time for the real fight, he muttered under his breath. This was the transformed golem, the level 150 mid-tier boss of the Snowy Mountain Golem. As soon as the boss appeared, it let out a thunderous roar that echoed in all directions, greeting the group of adventurers standing before it. The massive creature then slammed its enormous hand down onto the ground. Even though it didn't hit anyone directly, the shockwave from the strike sent everyone flying in all directions. Damn, it's huge! Someone screamed in panic. Seeing this, Shirasaki immediately sprang into action. Everyone, fall back, he commanded. From the palm of his hand, a streak of black lightning shot out, piercing through the boss's body and causing it to explode into a shower of debris. The group, who had expected a more intense battle, stood stunned. That's it? One hit and it's done? They muttered, clearly surprised. The mid-tier boss was supposed to be a tough fight, yet Shirasaki made it look effortless. Well, that was a waste of fear. They all sighed in relief. However, their relief was short-lived, as the monster's core had not been destroyed. Immediately after the explosion, the shattered pieces of stone and rock began to gather together, reforming the golem as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Shirasaki didn't hesitate. He sent another lightning bolt towards the creature, shattering its body once again. However, the core of the golem seemed to have some strange power. It was somehow dodging the lightning, slipping away and burrowing back into the debris to rebuild its body once more. Damn it! Shirasaki gritted his teeth in frustration. Sano, recognizing that simply attacking and waiting for the creature to recover wasn't going to work, quickly adjusted his strategy. Timing was crucial. As the golem's stone body began to collapse again, Sano took his chance and moved in to intercept the core. I'll stop it using the threads of the giant spider, he thought, quickly sending several strands of silk flying toward the red core. However, his movements were a bit too slow. By the time the threads reached the core, it had already begun attracting the scattered rocks, reconstructing its body. Sano cursed in frustration, realizing that his plan wasn't working. Damn it! The giant spider's threads don't seem to have any effect. Sano thought furiously. I need to do something before it fully reforms with the golem pieces. At the same time, Nanase also sprang into action. Hunter Sano, fall back, she shouted, releasing her blue flame pillar, targeting the massive body of the golem. The entire creature's body began to glow a bright blue as it was melted by the intense heat. Afterward, she called out to the group. Close-range attacks won't do anything. We need to melt it down all at once. Shirasaki responded with a bit of annoyance. I know. Don't get all high and mighty. That's why I'm thinking of another way. If we're not careful, we might end up melting everything left here. He glanced around at the battlefield, taking in the surroundings. The one thing more abundant than snow here was the rocks. Since they had already taken down 200 smaller monsters, the amount of debris left behind was enormous. Sano, meanwhile, couldn't help but dread the thought of having to melt all this remaining rock. Just thinking about it made his heart skip a beat. This was the terrifying aspect of the transformed golem. He recalled the warning the four-eyed girl had given them about this raid. The most troublesome part of this expedition is the mid-tier boss, the transformed golem, she had said. It's also the most terrifying feature of the sensory labyrinth. The labyrinth reveals the next area when the conditions are met. When you defeat the stone golem, the transformed golem's core will appear. The remaining pieces of the golem will gather and regenerate, meaning we'll be fighting the leftover pieces of the golem we just barely managed to defeat. Usually, this leads to exhaustion and even annihilation of the party. Compared to normal labyrinths, this is said to be as difficult as the final boss. Shirasaki then added, in short, we're dealing with a nightmare. Nanase, however, quickly outlined the solution. There are two ways to defeat it. The first is to destroy the core so it can't regenerate. The second is to melt down the remaining parts of the golem. If we do that, there won't be any stones left for it to rebuild. Back to the present. Nanase's attacks were successfully melting the stone body of the golem into liquid, but using her skills continuously was beginning to take a toll on her. Beads of sweat started to roll down her beautiful face as she grew more and more fatigued.